And can I remind everyone that this meeting will be recorded and that the recording will be subsequently made available for public listening. Gillian, can you confirm Sederunt, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can confirm we're quoted. We have 16 members present and we have an apology from Councillor Patsy Gilroy.
Are there any declarations of interest? In that case, I have a declaration of interest in item 7. Item 7 is the Knowe Wind Farm Kirkconnel Sanquhar consultation regarding an application made under Section 36 of the Electricity Act for the erection of 30 wind turbines and associated infrastructure. I sit on the Community Liaison Committee along with Councillor Simon, have done for a number of years, and I've also formally indicated my support for this particular application. And as a consequence of that, I will declare an interest and ask Gillian to find a substitute at that moment in time. The minute of the previous meeting, is that a true record? Can you then, Gillian, outline the procedure to be followed today?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the Planning Applications Committee will consider each application in turn as detailed on the agenda. The case officer or other appointed officer will make a short presentation addressing the determinant issues accompanied by digital images. Any late information, amendments or corrections will be reported at this time. Members may ask questions of officers following the presentation on points of clarification. The Chairman has been provided with a list of eligible representatives who have registered to speak at this meeting within the period specified in Council policy. No other persons will be allowed to speak. The Chairman will individually invite those who have registered in advance to speak to make their representation, either after which they may be questioned by committee members. The order of eligible parties being heard will be as follows: third parties objecting to an application, third parties supporting an application, statutory consultees objecting to an application, elected members of Dumfries and Galloway Council who are not members of Planning Applications Committee, applicants or their agents. Representatives have been placed in alphabetical order and a copy of the public speaking list is available from the committee officer taking notes of our proceedings. Presentations will be strictly limited to 3 minutes per person, excepting for national and major developments, which by their very nature are more complex, where the time limit will be 5 minutes. The Chairman of the committee will ask you to come to a conclusion if you take too long. Representatives are encouraged to use the time allotted to clarify any points they consider material and address the determining issues. Certain matters are not normally material planning considerations and will not be taken into account by the Council when deciding on a planning application. Representatives should not raise any new matters without explaining why they were not raised earlier with the case officer. Please do not repeat what is in the report, as members will have already read the report. After all the representations have been heard, the meeting is then in formal session and no members of the public may address the committee from the public gallery. The Planning Applications Committee will then proceed to determine the application, or where appropriate, agree a recommendation to be made to full council who will determine the application. Thank you.
Thanks, Gillian. We now go to item 4 on the agenda. Change of use from dwelling house, former shop, to hot food takeaway, erection of extension to rear elevation and formation of additional doorway and installation of replacement windows in front elevation at 31 and 31A St Cuthbert Street, Kirkcudbright. The application type full planning permission. The recommendation approved subject to conditions and the case officer is Judith Turnbull. Judith, will you take us through your presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. Oh. Slight problem. Maybe it won't.
One of the briefest, most succinct part.
Moving swiftly on. First of all, I'd just like to run through a few corrections in the report just before we go on to the presentation. The first is on page 8, on paragraph 1.5. At the moment, the first sentence there reads, "To the front elevation, a replacement hardwood front door is proposed with a single glazed panel above and timber panel below." That should read with 2 glazed panels above and 2 timber panels below. Also the drawing list on page 15. This is just amendments to the drawings. It's not major changes. The first one, ELS 05, should be 07 and dated the 19th of November. And the next one, GF 03, should be 04, dated the 21st of November. And also adding to that list is a location plan of the 29th of April, 2013. So moving on to the presentation, this is the location plan. I'm afraid I'm kind of on the half bend here. This is the location plan. The property is situated quite close to the crossroads between St Cuthbert Street and St Mary Street in Kirkcudbright, across the road from the Royal Hotel and just down and across from Tesco. The main shops in Kirkcudbright are situated generally on St Mary's and St Cuthbert Street. And the application site lies within the conservation area, but it's not a listed building. This is the location plan. As stated in paragraph 1.2 of the report, the last use of the property was believed to be as a single residential property. There is an indications, however, that it was used as business or retail premises, but if that was the case, it was many, many years ago, about 40 or so. But we have no records of any history on our planning system. The rear of the property is accessed by a shared close between the application site and number 29. And the close, if I can kind of point it out, the close runs in and then along. In from the main street and then along, right along here, accessing the back of the gardens and the yards in the area. The shaded area on that plan is the proposed new extension. Oh, we seem to have got us down here as well. Oh, no, sorry. Not anymore. This is the proposed, existing and proposed ground floor plans. There's no alterations to the first floor. This is the existing and this is the proposed, and it's just really primarily extending the existing extension, which is this part, into that area. The existing boundary walls would require to be rebuilt and raised by about 300 millimetres. This is existing and proposed front elevations. The existing UPVC door would be replaced with a more traditional timber panel door, and the ground and first floor windows, which are currently UPVC, would be replaced with some timber sash and case. A condition has been included to approve the final details of both the doors and the windows. This is the existing and proposed rear elevations. You can see the new extension with a slightly lower roof level, and also a new flue coming through the roof. The extent of the flue was reduced after comments received back from the conservation officer. This is a detail of the front door, but as I say, we've put a condition in, recommend a condition for approval of the door and the windows. Moving on to the photographs, this is from about the entrance to Tesco. we've got the property nicely outlined in yellow. And next door, down the street, we've got Portpatrick's restaurant, and then there's a cafe on the corner, which used to be the Belfry. I'm not quite sure if it's been reopened as a cafe. Oh no, I don't know what's happened. 5 minutes. That wasn't good. Perhaps we could maybe do it by using try using on the computer. Maybe it's this.
Sorry, we've had huge problems this morning trying to get this to work at all. It was working and now it's decided it's not going to, I'm afraid. It's not coming back up at all when you press through the options. If that's the problem, we might have to move to Plan B, which is using a freestanding projector, in which case we would need a couple of minutes to wire that up, I'm afraid. Are you happy with us doing that, Chair?
Absolutely. I will have to have some type of opportunity to view the location plan, site, etc. So whatever we can do, we will do. We'll just wait a few minutes, and if need be, we can have a 5-minute recess to allow staff to deal with it. I didn't realise anyone had left. Judith, you want to carry on?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. I think we've moved slightly on. Yeah. This is. I think I kind of covered what was on this slide, just showing the location of the property. This is taken just the closest to the right-hand side. Just the white wall is the inside wall of the close. Coming through from St Cuthbert Street. You can see the enclosed yard and the existing extension there through the timber gates. You can see the close running along diagonally along the back of the properties on St Mary's Street. This is taken from the close running diagonally up, looking back towards the corner. That's the nicely outlined yellow, the rear of the property, and the flue would come up just to the side of the Velux, the roof light window on that. This is two images which have been nicely joined together. The first one is taken, the first one up here, this is taken really, this is the same corner, so it's taken looking one way along the diagonal close into the yard. So this area here would be, the wall would be raised about 600 mil and a new roof put on, which would go along here, this is looking the other way and round and enclose the yard. This photograph is just looking from outside the timber gates, looking up the close onto St Cuthbert Street, and this is the arrangement of the neighbouring property of 29 St Cuthbert Street. The main considerations in the assessing of this proposal was the principle of the development, the impact on the character and amenity of the conservation area, and the design. And these are fully discussed in section 4 of my report. The Council's Conservation Officer was satisfied with the appearance of the building and its impact on the conservation area. The environmental standards have raised no objection subject to the recommended conditions on noise and emissions. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to conditions.
Thank you, Judith. Unfortunately, this equipment is maintained by an independent company, so we are where we are today. So in every item on the agenda, I will ask if any member wants to refer to images or slides when they're asking officers questions. If no, then put on the light and open the curtain and you can still ask officers questions, but at least that way we'll have the opportunity to view slides if need be. So does any member have a question that requires a reference back to a particular slide for the officer? Councillor Maitland.
My apologies, I've left my card. What I wanted to ask, Chairman, is about the boundary treatment. This proposal builds right up to the boundary of the back area. And I mean, I've got no opinion particularly about whether or not that's a good thing, but is that something we would be expecting to do normally, to build right up to a back boundary?
I'll ask David to respond to that, Councillor Maitland. Or Judith's able to, Judith.
With this application, the applicant realised that the other people owned land within the application site, and that was acknowledged on the application form. And they said they had notified the owner of the land solicitor, because I believe one of the boundary walls is a mutual boundary, so half of it lies on somebody's land and half of it lies on the applicant's land. So we took it in good faith that they had notified the owner of the other land, and as far as we were concerned, that we were happy with that.
That's great, Judith, but I think the question was more, in general, which is why I asked David, do we normally accept building right up to the boundary of land that's not in the applicant's ownership?
In planning terms, you can build right on to the boundary. There's not an impediment. As Judith is rightly saying, the only issue is if you're encroaching beyond the boundary or it's a mutual boundary, then you have to notify the owners, but there's no impediment in planning terms to building right on a boundary.
And to label the thing, is that unique, or do we do that periodically?
Far from, we get a lot of extensions right on mutual boundaries.
Thanks for that. Councillor Blake.
I'm glad you could see me in this gloom. Again, still speaking about the boundary wall, I could appreciate built up right to the boundary wall. What about any rainwater pipes that could possibly extend into the alleyway? Is that the case in this?
Judith or David?
In planning terms, there are what are called air rights. So yes, anything which is projecting over somebody else's property technically requires them to notify that party as well. But as Judith was saying, that was done in this instance.
I hope we're not straying into questions for officers, because I did say whilst they wanted to refer to the images, I know Councillor McKee wanted to ask, because if no, it's better if we're able to put some light on the subject and see each other. We seem to have gone just now to questions for officers. Do you need the images, Councillor McKee, for your question? Does anyone else have questions that require reference to the overhead projections or images? No. In that case, can we either open a curtain or put on the lights, please, until we carry on with the rest of the debate? Amy? Good. Now, we're still on questions for officers. Councillor McKee.
Yes, Chair, I've got two. One's relating to fire escape. Was there a fire escape onto that back alley? And the other one's regarding the width of the door, where the conservation officer says the door should not be widened. Is the door wide enough for disabled access? That was
Judith?
the questions I had.
Both of them, please.
As far as I'm aware from from letters that have come in, there may be fire escapes through the close from other properties, but this proposal doesn't impede that at all. It was an enclosed yard. They're just really putting a roof over that. So I can't see that would make any difference, but that would be something that building control would have an input in.
And your second question about door width.
If you didn't mind, Chair, just come back on that. Are you saying that at the present moment there's nothing on the plans showing an emergency access? Emergency access if that you've gone on fire or something like that?
Well, I think what Judith is saying is building control will deal with, if we grant planning permission, that will be a condition that building control may well place in the building, because that does know what we're dealing with today. But Judith, if you'd like to respond to that, please, and then the door width.
Yes, both the fire escapes and the size of the door would be regulated by building control. The conservation officer was, I think, we were commenting on an earlier proposal which was amended for the final amended design.
Councillor McComb.
Thanks, Chair. Bearing in mind what has been said about building up to the boundary, how will waste bins be accommodated?
Judith. It may well, again, be a condition that building control would apply, but David, if Judith's not sure.
I mean, again, that is something which would have to be addressed at the building standards stage. Certainly you would have space, you can probably see in the rear there, the utility area, where they would have interior bins. They would clearly have a door that would allow them to take the access through to the pend and then get them out onto the public road. It wouldn't be impeding other people's access to take their wheelie bins out to the public road. There's no closing off of the rear close.
Councillor Witts.
Thanks, Chair. I'm interested in paragraph D, page 9, and in conjunction with the explanation as to the course of the new flue and what is said in the first sentence of that paragraph. Do I take it that the roof of this property is held in common with the flat above, and therefore the owners of both properties have a joint right in terms of the roof and what's involved there? Is this? I suppose I'm not allowed to ask if the properties, the upstairs flat is held in conjunction by the same owner of as the applicant, but I just wanted some clarification on getting around the situation of the flue in terms of the rights of access to building.
Judith?
The ground floor and the first floor flats are in the same ownership. Does that answer your question? Can I ask you to repeat the first part of the question, please?
Right. It's not significant in this case when ownership is the same person owns both properties, but I presume it was regarding the right of the ground floor owner to access to make alterations to the roof in terms of the flue, because both parties, both the ground and the upper and the flat, I presume, are jointly and severally responsible for the roof, and any alterations to the roof. Do they not need permission of both parties?
I'm sure that would be a civil matter though, Councillor Witts. We're simply granting planning permission today. Whether or not it can actually be implemented or no may well be another matter. David, do you want to respond to that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that's exactly correct. It's a private civil matter which isn't a material planning consideration. Obviously, to implement anything, you need to have all the relevant ownerships and permissions from all the relevant parties. But in this instance, we understand that the ground floor and the flat at the first floor level are in the same ownership, so it shouldn't be a problem.
Any other questions for the planning officer? Okay, thank you very much, Judith. We now have the first of our speakers, Mr. David Lissells, the agent, who will have 3 minutes. And I think I noticed he had an overhead projection or a slide to put up. So if we could maybe just, once Mr. Lissells gets seated and shown how to operate the system, if we could. Do you want to talk through the presentation, Mr. Lissells, whilst the curtains are closed and your OHP is up, or do you want to do your presentation first and then refer to the OHP? Okay. We will tie them both to your 3 minutes, of course, and whenever you start speaking, your 3 minutes will start.
Hello, I'm David Lessells, agent for the applicant. Just like to say a few words and then answer any questions that the councillors may have. On the presentation of the rear elevation slide, it had the rear elevation outlined in yellow. The yellow line should actually extend above the pend, and the windows to the right-hand side of the yellow line there, that's the first window there, and just above the pen is owned by the applicant, as is the roof above. That's correct, just there. So it extends slightly above, directly over the pen and 100% of the pen there. So as far as ownership is concerned, the applicant owns all of the ground floor and all of the upper floor. It's just to clarify that point. The applicant has said to me that if the application is approved, then there would be 2 or 3 people employed in the property, and we've worked hand in hand with the conservation area officer and with planning officer, throughout the application. So if you have any questions regarding the application, we're only too happy to answer them. And I've concluded my talk.
Thanks very much, Mr. Lissells. Does anyone have any questions for the agent? Councillor Carruthers?
Just a quick one in regards to the flue, what was mentioned earlier. The conservation officer would have preferred it to have been with existing flues within the existing chimney stacks. What was the particular reason why that was like that, David?
On the reason that it was like that is that it gives structurally inside, there's an existing interior cupboard on the upper floor, which would accommodate the flue perfectly, from the range etc. below, and the stainless steel ceiling that would be over the top of any of the cooking facilities. So it gives a direct line, and plus the officer, conservation officer, didn't want the flue to be exposed to the exterior of the building and would have liked it to be contained internally. The diameter of the existing flues on the upper floor are for, existing fireplaces, coal, solid fuel fireplaces. And if the applicant chose to perhaps put a gas flue system in, then that leaves that opportunity to take it up through the existing chimney and out through the air, without creating a secondary flue in the exterior.
Thanks for that. Any other questions for the agent? In that case, if you'd like to return to your seat, sir, please. Thank you very much. Members are now in session. Councillor Maitland, then Councillor Dryborough.
Well, I was simply going to say that I commend the approach which has been taken by the applicant in working closely with the conservation officer, because I think we've got a very good solution here, Chairman. And because there is a willingness to work with the conservation officer, there is really no difficulty at all with accepting this. And I am very happy to propose that we accept this. I noticed the conditions, which are quite clear about the door and the windows, the detailing, that's important. And I would expect that to be followed through, because there was a gaffe made elsewhere in Kirkcudbright where the window detailing was not followed through properly. But in this particular instance, I feel confident that the agent is going to work closely with the council, and I commend it to you.
Thanks for that, Councillor Maitland. Councillor Dryborough?
And no, that point, just happy to second the recommendations.
Thanks for that. Is there anybody otherwise minded? In that case, Councillor Thompson?
Just a point raised earlier from Councillor McKee to do with building control. Is that implicit, or does that need to be actually stated in the recommendations?
David?
Building regulations are separate to planning, so there obviously they would need to obtain it. It wouldn't be appropriate to have a condition requiring that it complies with other regulations, because it may or may not be able to comply with that anyway.
Happy with that, Stephen? Okay. In that case, Gillian, will you declare the decision of the committee, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the decision is to approve subject to the conditions detailed in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Gillian. We'll go on to item 5, the erection of 2 holiday chalets, formation of 4 car parking spaces at Bardristane Farm, Gatehouse of Fleet, Castle Douglas. The application type full planning permission. The recommendation is approved subject to conditions, and the case officer is Judith Turnbull. Again, could we switch off the lights, please, and close the curtain, and we'll have Judith's presentation when she's ready. Thanks, Judith.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is an application for 2 holiday chalets at Bardristane Farm near Gatehouse of Fleet. This is the location plan. The site is on a small road, the U264, which runs parallel to the A75 north of Auchenleary and Moshard. You'll probably maybe be familiar with this. We did have a previous application for 10 chalets at this location, which came before this committee in 2012. It was recommended for approval and it was refused, and the refusal was appealed to Scottish ministers and was dismissed. This is the existing site plan. It's proposed to demolish this farm building here and these 2 buildings to make way for the proposal. Also, within the farm, there's an outbuilding here, traditional outbuilding, which you'll see in the photographs later, which has planning permission for conversion to 5 dwelling houses. This is the proposed site plan. The 2 chalets here and here would be accessed directly from the public road. This access has permission under a previous proposal. There's parking and turning area provided, parking and turning area in here. And up in part of the existing field is the gas tanks. The sewage from the development would be piped along underground along the Verd, my hand's a bit shaky, and would be fed into an existing septic tank across the road, which currently serves the farmhouse and is proposed to serve the 5 dwelling houses from the converted buildings. The proposed chalets, there are 2 units. I've only provided drawings of one of them because one's a mirror image handed version of the other. They would be finished with natural slate to the roofs, vertical softwood latch-lap boarding to the external walls. The windows would be stained timber, and the substructure would be grey self-coloured render. I say they're fairly modest units with 2 bedrooms. This is a view of the farm looking from the east, looking west. These are the traditional farm buildings which would be converted under the other application, farmhouse, and this is the building which is proposed to be demolished to make way for the chalets. This is a view taken from the north, looking down. The chalets would be behind the silage clamp. The gas tanks would be about this part in the field, and the access would come in just about there from the road. This is a view from looking east along, and this is the verge that the sewage would run along. This is showing the approximate location of chalet 1, which is the one closest to the road. This building here would be demolished. And this is the approximate location of chalet number 2, which is more the one that's up the hill, and this building here, kind of tumbled down building, would be demolished to make way for it. The levels of the chalets have been altered during the application process to reduce the proposed underbuilding, which is now about 300 millimetres, and it's considered acceptable. The final image is a view looking from the west, looking along the road. The chalets would be in here, and also the second one would be behind that existing building. That building's being retained. This building here is proposed to demolish. With regard to consultations, neither the council roads nor trunk roads have objected to the development, although the council roads have recommended conditions be included, and these are included. SEPA were consulted on the drainage, but because of the small scale of the development, they've just issued their standing advice. The septic tank will be required to be regulated by SEPA and building control, who will also need to be satisfied that the wastewater can be suitably treated. In conclusion, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions on occupancy, landscaping and roads.
Thanks very much, Judith. Again, any questions for officers using the images that are available to us, or can we open the window again and continue with the rest of the process? Councillor Maitland, Councillor Thompson.
Could we possibly go back to the from the east, looking west along the road? Yes, there. Can I just ask? It's really a question, with that in context. What is the arrangements with planning, in respect of planning, with the agreed 5 houses having been started but not completed, and then going on to agree another 2? Would we not normally expect in an arrangement like this to deal with the 5 and then the 2? I'm just curious to know as to what the council would expect to do. Because, if we think about this in terms of planning, I suppose it's possible that you might end up with just 2 chalets and some buildings not being done, not being replaced. So it's just a question of principle of development, whether you do one and then finish the other. I'm aware I can probably speak to the applicant later on.
Thanks, Councillor Maitland. David?
Thank you, Chair. Judith can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I think the house that you're seeing there, more or less just off centre in white, is the first of the 5 that has been converted. It's been finished and is on the market, not yet occupied, I understand. So there are another 4 units which have a valid planning permission. Once a permission has been secured, then there is normally no time limit to the completion of that development, unless the council was to serve a completion notice requiring that a development be finished within a certain timescale, which are pretty unusual. It is open to the applicant to continue that development until it is complete. We've obviously got a freestanding application here which needs to be considered on its own merits. It is something that members would have to bear in mind, is that the 2 chalets might happen and the other 4 units might never be converted. The 5 steadings could be implemented and the chalets never implemented, or the whole lot. That's actually up to the applicant once they've got their permission to develop it as and when they see fit. But there's no impediment to us determining this application. It certainly, I would suggest, would not be correct in law for us to refuse this on the basis that he hadn't implemented the other ones yet.
Thanks, Councillor Maitland. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Chair. It's actually the first couple of drawings just to do with the layout. If I could maybe go back to those, please. Well, I suppose my question is really about in 4.4 there, it's pointing out that it's not a proposed comprehensive recreational scheme. But looking at that, it's beginning to look a bit like that, given the sort of permissions that have already been granted. So I'm just wondering, in terms of, on page 22, part 1, sites should either be associated physically with farm buildings, and I understand that some of the farm buildings are going to be removed. So at what point does it stop being a farm and start being a sort of recreational scheme? And it's just really to get a bit of clarity in that, because obviously there's got to be a point where there's one building left and the rest of it's all sort of holiday chalets or whatever. So it's just really to get a wee bit of detail in that.
Judith? Or David, whoever's best suited to answer it.
In terms of structure plan policy D24, it allows either the sort of development in association with an existing hotel, existing farm buildings, or a comprehensive recreational development. There's no definition of what that comprehensive recreational development is, but what was in the minds, I think, of people when they wrote that was something like an entire Southern Est style development, for example, where there's an extension to that. In this element here, there still are obviously farm buildings. You do have a number of the steadings being converted to houses, but there are still elements of the farm which are clearly there just now and are, as far as we can tell, still likely to be required for the operation of the farmland. It wouldn't really matter in planning terms if it were to be associated with a farm building or as a comprehensive development. I wouldn't suggest this is a comprehensive development, but it currently sits within a farm where there are farm buildings, and therefore it would be appropriate to consider under Structure Plan Policy D24.
Thanks, David. Any other members using the images that are available? No? In that case, Amy, can you open the curtains, please? Now, we're still in questions for officers. Councillor McKee.
Yeah, Chair, it's paragraph 4.11. You know how we get comments about the irrelevant local development plan, the proposed local development plan. Now, I feel that 4.11 is kind of contradictory, where it's noted that the proposed policy on tourism, ED10, no longer supports new groups of chalets where they are physically associated with farm buildings. However, the LDP has not yet been adopted and does not yet outweigh current development plans. Now, I just feel that kind of contradicts advice we get in other planning applications where the new proposed local development plan seems to take precedence over the previous conditions where there are differences. Could you clarify that for me, please?
I will ask David to clarify that for you.
I'm sure he will. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. We are in a slightly unusual position just now in that we have a development plan which part of it dates from, the local plans are from 2006 and the structure plan dates way back to 1999. We are at a very advanced stage with the LDP now, in as far as that the council's position was made clear earlier on this year. It's gone before the reporter, and we have now got their comments back. Nonetheless, Section 25 of the Planning Act requires that we determine applications in accordance with the existing development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. So we have to look at this under Structure Plan Policy D24 as being the most appropriate one. Nonetheless, a material consideration is, as set out in paragraph 411 there, that we do have an LDP at a fairly advanced stage, which has a policy that is going to shift from the current one. It's really a matter for the decision maker how much weight they want to give the new policy, but you would have to bear in mind that it would only really be appropriate if you had something which was, maybe the analogy, the best one would be the wind farm policies, because the wind farm policies are clearly out of date in the structure plan, so much so we've created the interim planning policy, which is the council's current policy, and that's better reflected in the LDP. I don't think there's such a shift with this one that you you would have to totally disregard the existing development plan. But it's a matter for the committee to actually weigh up how much weight you give to one over the other. We've clearly made our recommendation in 411, but it's quite legitimate for the committee to take a different stance to that.
Thanks for that, Councillor McKee. Councillor Hislop?
Chair, it's on the same sort of point. Because of the fact that we're looking at adopting or possibly adopting the plan in a week, 10 days' time, should it be given more weight, or should we be looking to assist applications where they do have contrary policy proposals within them? One like this where it says one clearly doesn't, one clearly does. Should that be a case that we should look to assist something like this?
Again, I think David just gave you advice, but I'll ask him to repeat it.
Although the reporter's recommendations are coming back to the full council in the start of July, there is still another further process to go through, so it's going to be later on in the year before the council will be in a position to actually formally adopt the LDP, so there is still some time away. As I say, it is a matter for yourselves as the decision maker. If you are uncomfortable about this, then you clearly can decide that you either want to determine it in accordance with the forthcoming plan, or under Section 25, as I say, the clear advice is that you've got to look at the development plan which exists first, but then weigh it up against other material considerations. This is basically the sort of decision that the committee's got to make. My recommendation is that I think at the moment there's not such a quantum shift in policy that it would really require us to disregard the existing development plan, but clearly it is something that you have to give some weight to.
Thanks, David. Any other questions for the case officer? Councillor Thompson?
Just on the same point, I think on page 22, under the current policy, we're looking at sites being associated physically with farm buildings, but in the new LDP, that's the opposite. So, there's a clear, although we're currently where we are now and we can't necessarily predict what will happen in terms of how the LDP goes forward, it's clear that there's a complete difference there in terms of what we would otherwise grant in the future should the LDP be adopted. So, again, it's the same advice, I'm sure, but I think there is a difference there that's clear.
I'm sure that's something members will debate when the opportunity presents itself. Can I just also ask members to be sure they're clear and succinct when they're using the microphone so that everyone can hear what's being said? Any other questions for officers? Okay. In that case, we have one speaker who's Philip Hussey, the applicant. If you'd like to come forward, Philip, please. I will allow you 3 minutes and I'll give you a reminder with 30 seconds to go to draw your presentation to a conclusion. You've got a picture, okay. In that case, we'll close the curtains, see your picture, and we'll try and tie your presentation and your picture together into the 3 minute window you have. Just whenever you're ready, Mr. Hussey. At your own time, yes, just start now.
I'm speaking. I'm responding to the neighbours' complaints, and they've got basically two areas of complaint. One's sewage flowing along the road. I quote, "The continued use of the existing soakaway concerns me too, as more sewage will be passing in this direction," unquote. The picture shows my field with the fenced septic tank area behind the dyke. The neighbours live about a quarter of a mile along the road to the right uphill. It is physically impossible for sewage to climb a 2-metre high wall and flow uphill. The farm on the other side says, I quote, "There is also an existing problem with sewerage which overflows from the tanks and onto our land and surrounding properties," unquote. In the picture, his field is downhill of mine, out of sight, nearly a quarter of a mile away, so there is no sewage problem. That's really all that concerns with the photograph. Road traffic. This farm also says the road already struggles to cope with the volumes of farm vehicles and traffic. The road serves about 10 properties. According to the traffic officer's figures, this equates to 1 vehicle movement every hour. With my lodges, that would be an extra 2 vehicle movements a day, hardly struggling to cope, so there is no traffic problem. And what are the non-neighbours' complaints? Mr. Groom does not even live in Bardristane. He lives in a house about 7 miles away. His sole interest in Bardristane is his holiday cottage. He visits Bardristane about once a week to change the sheets. His website shows that his cottage rental is up to £840 a week. I think it is therefore obvious why he is making such a big effort to complain. His reasons for complaining are therefore not concerned with the environment or road safety, but are commercial. If the road is good enough for his visitors, then it's good enough for mine. Over the years, I've spent £250,000 on Bardristane, all of it into the local economy. The planning department has spent months and months examining my application. The application has been approved. The only reason for objection that I can see would be for commercial reasons, either on behalf of Mr. Groom or other persons. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hussey. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant? In that case, if you'd like to turn to your seat, sir, thank you very much for your presentation. Okay, members, we're now in session. Councillor Dryborough.
Thanks, Chair. I've read this report and I'm pretty happy with the outcome of this. Again, several times we've said that Dumfries and Galloway is open for business and it should be seen that way as well. This is another opportunity to expand a business and therefore I would recommend we go with the recommendations.
Thanks for that. Councillor Geddes.
Thanks, Chair. I would support these comments entirely. I was one of those that were present at the previous site visit in relation to an earlier proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Ogilvie.
We heard about the sewerage, but there's also, some of us got emails from some persons about the water supply, which is a private water supply from a borehole, and there's the worry of cross-contamination. Also in here, the planning office quoted as saying that with the number of dwellings that's proposed for this site, you would expect a more upgraded sewerage facility. Just wonder if you could comment on both of them.
David, would you like to comment on that?
That's certainly correct. I mean, I would have normally expected anything more than 10 members of the public to actually, in one property or more than one property, to be served by a sort of Clargester biodisc system, something like that, that's a sewage treatment plant rather than a septic tank. But again, it's going back to the comments made in the previous application. That's something which, before it would get a building warrant and before it would get a SEPA discharge consent, would have to be addressed. So in planning terms, we're satisfied that the principle of the drainage can be achieved, hence the recommendation for approval. But it may well be that when it comes to actually getting a building warrant or a SEPA consent, they will need to upgrade the septic tank to a full-blown treatment plant, because it would be serving the existing house, 5 new houses, plus these 2.
Councillor Logan, do you want to come back?
That would apply for the private water supply.
David?
Have a view on that as well.
Private water supply is a separate thing. There clearly aren't Scottish Water facilities in this area for either drainage or for water. It is a private borehole, as I understand, and it would need to be proved to be potable water by environmental health. But, you know, again, in principle, there's no reason in planning terms why it can't proceed.
Thanks, Councillor Logan. Councillor Maitland.
I just have a memory, it goes on from what Councillor Ogilvie was asking about with respect to the water. I have a memory that in a previous application in the Dalbeattie area, we did actually ask about when there were challenges with respect to water. And the planning committee did insist on knowing that there would be adequate water. I'm just quite curious to know as to why we are not worried about this in this instance. I mean, I understand that Scottish Water has no objections, but that's because they have no facilities.
Yeah. David, I'm sure we already had an answer from David, and it may be a condition that members would want to place on this permission, but David?
Indeed, I mean, if members are bothered, it certainly could be attached as a condition. but clearly the existing properties in the area we know can be serviced by a private water supply because they all are. It therefore becomes something that the applicant here wouldn't be able to market these chalets, and wouldn't be able to actually let them out to anybody if they weren't supplied by a water supply. Environmental health require private water supplies to be potable, as I said earlier. So there are other checks and balances in place. We know that in principle this area can be served by a private water supply, so in planning terms it is acceptable.
Sorry. Judith, yeah.
Thank you. I believe in Dalbeattie the objectors provided evidence that the water supply might be compromised by the additional development. So it was different from this.
Thank you for that, Chairman. That's helpful.
Thank you. Okay, no other members? If there are no other members, we currently have a motion by Councillor Dryborough, seconded by Councillor Geddes, that we accept the officer's recommendations and conditions attached thereby. Is there any other opposing view? In that case, Gillian, if you announce the committee's decision, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the decision is to approve the application subject to the conditions detailed in the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Gillian. We'll go to item number 6. Erection of dwelling house at land adjacent to 16 Rhonepark Crescent, Crossmichael, Castle Douglas. The application type is planning permission in principle. The recommendation is approved subject to conditions, and the case officer is Dean Clapworthy.
Chair, can I just offer a point of order? I need to declare an interest in this. It's been made plain to me by the sheet of representatives eligible to speak that I have a business connection with one, and I will withdraw from this application, and my apologies for late arrival.
Thanks for that, Councillor Dick. Okay. Amy, when you're ready, thank you. Dean.
Before I just go through the presentation, just an update on the report. At 3.1, there's a list of objectors to the application. That's actually should read as 19 objectors, not 18, and it should include Caroline Carmichael of Hawks Court, Crossmichael. We actually took her objection into account. It's just her name's missing off the list. Okay. That's the application site on the west side of Crossmichael, towards the end of what is, for the greater length, certainly up to the turning head, is a private road serving a fairly modern bungalow estate. The site's bounded by existing house to the south, open agricultural land between the site and the loch. A fairly new sewage treatment site. It's probably been installed in the last 6 or 7 years, and just some further agricultural land to the north and the roadside, and a private drive you can see just looping on the north side as it sort of curves round, that serves a further property to the north. That's an indicative site layout because it's for an application for planning permission in principle. It shows, it gives an indication of how you could site a house on the site. The hatch line that runs from bottom right to top left is the position of Scottish Water main sewer, and there's a requirement to give that a 2 metre clearance, so that's why they've set the house slightly back from that, just to indicate where the front of a house would be required to be positioned. Accessing off the private road, showing a 1.8 metre wide continuation of the footpath that runs across number 16 presently, and 2 parking spaces obviously. That's a profile through the site, done in order to demonstrate that the house or any house on the site wouldn't be at risk of flooding because of the initial SEPA response. So what they've done is provided a profile through the site, and SEPA have since and the flood risk management team have confirmed that they've got no concern with regard to flooding at the site or elsewhere based on that drawing. Now through the images, that's from the road end of the private road. What you've got in the foreground there is a private track running to the property behind the viewer there. We've got number 16 with the conservatory on its side. The site has a 16-metre frontage to Rhonepark Crescent. And this is panning right from the previous view. Obviously the locks just coming into view. And panning right again, you've got the sewage works. And the site boundary across the front of the sewage is approximately about where the second post is from the right, running down to the boundary with the sewage works. That's looking back the opposite way from the previous view, looking at the road end at Rhonepark Crescent. What you see is obviously fairly contemporary single-storey bungalows. Looking back the other way across the 16-metre site frontage, further bungalows going back towards the access or where the road is adopted further around the corner. That's the end of the presentation. It's all set out in the report. Recommendations is to approve the application. And just one further comment of clarification. The application has been dealt with in the knowledge that the site falls within international designated ecological designations. So just to confirm, there's no ambiguity. It falls within a designated site. It's been assessed as having very limited value as far as the designation is concerned, and hence the response from SNH. That's it as far as I'm concerned, just at the moment.
Thanks, Dean. Does any member have any questions for Dean that require the images to be on display? In that case, Amy, if you could open the curtain, please. Oh, Tracy, is it? Questions for officers? Any questions for Dean? No. Oh, Mr. Councillor McComb.
Mr. Chair, could Dean confirm whether or not any of the neighbouring properties also fall within the international protected site?
Dean?
The images that have... We consulted SNH, and they've consulted specifically with regard to the site subject to this planning application. We haven't gone any further than that to try and confirm whether properties fall within the designation. It's probable that the designations were finalised or more recently updated in the knowledge that the estate as it stands currently exists, so the designation excludes private property. We've got information later on with the submitted documents from the objectors that show the extent in the immediate locality of the site of the designated sites. From recollection, they appear to exclude private gardens and properties, probably because they were drawn, the boundaries were redrawn at a point since the properties have been erected and occupied.
Thanks, Councillor McComb. Carry on. Forgotten your name.
How close will the proposed actual building be to the sewage works?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
How close will the actual building or the proposed dwelling house be to the actual sewage works?
Yeah. Well, the site shares a boundary with the sewage works, and that you can possibly just make it out. The site in there shown on the image is indicative. If committee or they got approval by other means for the principle of development, it'd be subject to a requirement for further application with the full details of the position and the design and materials and so on of any proposed dwelling. This is just given for indication, but looking at that, it's I'm guessing, because I haven't got a scale rule, but it's probably within about 8 to 10 metres, the nearest corner of that suggested dwelling to the boundary with the sewage works, not necessarily to the infrastructure of the sewage works, just to the fence and hedgerow boundary of the sewage works.
Stephen.
Thank you. It's just a question again on the LDP. Principle of development 4.4 and then 4.5 over the page and page 34. here we're looking at the areas of local environmental importance, and it's saying there that around 30 to 40% of the site is within that, and that's what we'd be considering now. But the LDP in the next paragraph actually would do away with that sort of designation, so it wouldn't necessarily be relevant should we consider it under those auspices. Just a wee comment on that. That would be helpful.
In the report, I've gone through two processes. I've gone through an analysis of the proposal relative to the current local plan policy, and whilst there's an acknowledgement that there is a partial encroachment into GP43 area, they're required to look at that in the context of the whole allocated area. And I think, I don't recall which paragraph I've noted it in, but I've actually noted that that protected area runs essentially the whole west side of Crossmichael for a length of about 800 metres between Crossmichael and the lock side. And in the context of that designation, I've made the point that a partial overlap into that site doesn't undermine the purpose of that designation. So I've made the point that our assessment is that if you're proposing it entirely and considering it entirely under the local plan policy, it still satisfies the requirements of the local plan policy. The proposed LDP would do away entirely with the GP43 area, and the entire site and more would fall within the settlement boundary as proposed by this council. And I understand the reporters reported back recently on the settlement boundary and is satisfied. We've compared this with what the reporters suggested, and there's no change to the settlement boundary and the white land within the settlement boundary.
Stephen?
I'm just, I suppose, with the previous application as well, I'm just sort of curious as to what benefit it actually serves to include the LDP, which we don't have at the moment yet, and the current one, where there's obviously a conflict in terms of what we should be considering.
I think it may be a material consideration, but Gillian, did you want that, David?
I think the point I made is that if in assessing and analysing the proposal under the statutory local plan policy, the point made in the report is there is no conflict.
Happy with that, Stephen. Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. In regards to page 31, 2.6 Scottish Water's response, Part B, could you just further explain just what that means, please?
It refers to the hatch line on this site plan. The hatch line is actually the agent has plotted the position of the Scottish Water main sewer as it runs, obviously through the neighbouring property as well. It'll run through various private gardens to the southwest or bottom right of that image. It runs through the site and obviously connects with the upgraded sewage works. The response is basically saying that if the development impinges on their assets, then the developer has to approach Scottish Water about that matter. It's not a matter that is dealt with through the planning process, but it's directly between the applicant or developer and Scottish Water.
Do you want to come back, Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. Just so if this is proposed, it's no effects to your saying. So therefore, if the proposals, if the final application or reserve matters, whatever it is, comes back and it was proposed being over the top of that sewer, then there would be a discussion between Scottish Water and the developer to outline exactly what would need to be done at that point. Is that what you're saying?
Dean?
If obviously they get approval and they come back with detailed matters, and it showed a build over the sewer, I would expect that that's because they've satisfied themselves directly with Scottish Water that's something that's feasible and technically appropriate, and that's been agreed. Otherwise, it'd be wasting everybody's time if they came back, and that wasn't acceptable to Scottish Water.
Thanks, Ian. Councillor Haslett?
Chair, it's in relation to 2.4 A and C. Within 2.4A, it says there are natural heritage interests of international and national importance on or adjacent to the site. Yet in C, after being assessed, nor occupied by other identified natural heritage interests. Now, are there national or international interests on the site or not? That's on page 30.
Dean? Yeah, what they're saying is that the Ramsar, SPA and the SSI, obviously some of them are international designations, other national, they're saying that they are the international interest, the wider designation. And then there's a further comment on the value or assessment of the particular site subject to the plan application relative to the entire designation and the value that has to the designation.
Happy with that, Ivor? Any other questions for officers? In that case, we come to the list of representations. And in this case, we have some people speaking on behalf of 2 or 3. So the first speaker we have is Aileen Hendry, on behalf of herself, Mr. and Mrs. Darville, and Mr. David Dean. So Aileen will have 9 minutes to complete a presentation. I will remind you with 30 seconds to go, just to summarise and ask you to finish on the 9 minutes.
Thank you. Actually, I didn't realise I got 9 minutes. I thought I only had 3, so my speech will be short. As said, I'm representing some other residents in the Crossmichael area. We wish to oppose the application for the erection of a house adjacent to 16 Rhonepark Crescent. The plan for this development is a 1.5-storey house, which the Planning Application Committee report notes that land raising is also proposed on the site for the development to take place. There is no way that a 1.5-storey house on elevated land raised site would conform with the character and proportions of other properties in the area. As has been mentioned, all the properties are bungalows. The adopted local plan for Crossmichael allows for further development at Templins, and it states, and here I quote from the document, development there should reflect the existing style of adjacent houses. If that applies to Templin, therefore it should apply to Rhonepark Crescent. Sorry, I lost my place. Therefore, if the development application is adopted, we ask that the houses should be kept so that the roof ridge of the house is in line with the other houses on the same side of Rhonepark Crescent, i.e. 1-storey houses. There's also concern that if this development is adopted, it could provide for further sporadic development in this particular area and in other spaces locally. If this development does go ahead, we also ask that the developers are responsible for repairing the road, which is private, after development is completed. After Scottish Water did their development 5 years ago, the residents of Rhonepark Crescent paid to have the road. Scottish Water gave us a donation, but the rest of us all paid to have the road repaired to a decent level. But the road is private and not adopted by Dumfries and Galloway Council. And that is what I have to say. To conclude, we ask the planning application is denied.
Thank you very much, Aileen. Any member have any questions for Aileen? Councillor Carruthers.
Just a straightforward one. If we've got the picture back up, could you just outline what road you're talking about, just so I can ask further questions when you're finished? The private access road.
It's the whole street from... You come into Rhonepark Crescent, and there's 2 parts. You turn left, and there are 8 houses in that development. Those were the first houses, and that road is adopted. The road that comes up to the end, where the site is and where we live, is not adopted by the council. Okay? Thank you.
In that case, who actually owns that road? Is it the adjoining landowners?
It's the Bone Estate.
Thanks for that. Any other questions? In that case, Aileen, thanks very much for your presentation.
Thank
if
you.
you return to your seat, I'd be grateful. Next speaker is Mr. David Hendry on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Ackerley and Mr. Edward Hicks. Mr. Hendry, you have 6 minutes, and I will remind you with 30 seconds to go just to draw your presentation to a conclusion. Thank you.
I'm representing Edward Hex, who's a former chairman of the Crossmichael Community Council, and Mr. and Mrs. Ackerley, and I myself am the current treasurer of the Crossmichael Community Council. I would like to take up the important point of protected areas of open space and challenge the notion of stated in the PAC report that there is no conflict here. The current local development plan has been defined as open space for 30 or 40% of the site. That is in fact the meaning of the 30 or 40% figure in the site. That applies to open space. In fact, in the environmentally protected area and the Ramsar International area, the site is wholly contained within the environmentally protected area. And I'm concentrating on the protected areas here of open space. Now, the proposed LDP proposes to take the site coincidentally out with the area of protected open space. However, as recently as 5th of June 2014, the Scottish Government examination report produced by 3 reporters specifically recommends that the current LDP open space designation be reinstated, and so that 30 to 40% of the site would still apply. And for the councillors, that is stated on page 26 of the recommendations by issue number of the recommendations from the Scottish Government examination reporters. And I believe we believe that this should counter the quote significant weight unquote that the proposed local development plan should have, as stated by the current PAC report. Page 40 in policy CF3 and page 47 of the proposed local development plan state again on the subject of open space, not environmental space. There will be a presumption against development of open space identified for protection in LDP, in local development plan inset maps. And it quite specifically states development of open space for a purpose unrelated to use as open space will not be allowed unless, and then it says, open space can best be retained and enhanced through redevelopment of a small part of the site, which we believe is manifestly cannot be proved, or an adequate and acceptable replacement of the space lost can be provided and or paid for by the applicant within locality, and which we believe cannot be met, and alternative sites have been considered and no other appropriate site can be identified. And that is stated in on page 47 in policy CF3 of the proposed LDP. And for that reason, we would put forward the notion that these conditions are manifestly not met, and therefore, according to the proposed local development plan, this development should not be allowed. Lastly, I would like to bring up on policy CF3 of the proposed local development plan, paragraph 43 talks about how landscapes are perceived and experienced by both local communities and visitors to the region are important considerations, and that the council will take account of all these factors. Now, it is, and also in paragraph 4.42, the council will respect and protect and enhance the environment. And this, in view of the fact that the site is wholly within the internationally protected area, we submit that this is manifestly not the case. Lastly, I would bring to the council's attention the strength and depth of objectives by the local community. There are 19 objections altogether, as has been stated, and these represent 27 individuals. There are also 3 petitions with 49 people signing. There's obviously an overlap in this. And we believe that the local community should be listened to. For these reasons, I would ask the committee to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Henry. Anyone have any questions for Mr Henry? Councillor Hislop and Councillor Diggle.
Mr Henry, it's a site of national importance under Ramsar, SSI, etc. Can you give us some examples of, by developing the site, what will be lost in that area? You know, is there something specific to that area that needs to be kept in the, I think it's about a quarter of an acre. Is there something there that needs to be kept?
There isn't anything specific, except since the site is wholly contained within this area, one would, granting the application, would simply subtract that area from the site. That would be the loss. The whole issue of biodiversity has been raised by a number of objectors, and this is in itself is impossible to actually quantify. It's just I would reiterate this point about the council will respect, protect, and enhance the environment. Now, if you subtract something from the environment, you subtract an area from the protected environment, you cannot. You're not just not enhancing it. You're detracting from it. That would be my answer.
Thanks, Councillor Diggle.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering what the views of the Community Council were, because I see they're not listed as an objector.
In general, the Community Council tends not to take a specific view on, in fact, on a previous application, there were a large number of objectors to the proposal, and it was raised at the Community Council, but the Community Council didn't wish to take a specific view one way or the other, leaving it up to the individual objectors to make the case. And that is what we have done in this case. 3 of the person who was missed out of the list of objectors, Caroline Carmichael, is in fact the secretary of the Community Council, and we were expected to make our case as individuals and not to specifically involve the Community Council in what is a dispute within the local community.
Thanks for that. Thanks, Peter. Any other questions? In that case, Mr. Henry, please return to your seat, please. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We now come to Angela Piercy on behalf of herself, Julie Adams, Caroline Carmichael, Mr. and Mrs. Driscoll, Susan Lafarge, Mr. and Mrs. Livingstone, Mr. and Mrs. Morrison. And Angela will have 21 minutes, but hopefully no repeat what's already been said.
I'll try not to. If I may just stand as I speak.
I will remind you with 30 seconds to go. There's no rush though, whenever you're ready.
Oh, there is a rush. There is a rush, because I could speak for a very long time on this topic.
I understand you have a number of images that you want to be shown. So
Yes, please.
we will
If you don't
close the
mind.
curtain again, and if you're able
Lord,
to...
I need to be able,
Well, we'll do it both. We'll see the images first, and then we'll hear a
yes,
presentation.
and
We'll
see
include
if I
that in
can
the
still see.
21 minutes, though.
I will need to refer to notes. So.
Okay, so we'll do the images first, then we'll get the curtain open for you.
Right, that's fine. Right, the map here is from the Scottish National Heritage website. And I wonder, could we open the curtains again? Because I would like to make some points before we start on...
Okay, that's fine.
Sorry.
Can you open the curtain again, please? Well, we can try with the curtain open and see if members can see it, because
yes.
we might be able to manage with both. It's just more convenient.
That would be
with
better,
that.
I think, because I do need...
Just leave the curtains in,
yes.
if you don't mind.
Right, okay. Right, before we start looking at the maps, I wish to make the following points. This development should not be permitted because there is land use conflict. That's in relation to GP1 of the adopted Stewartly plan. My second point will be regarding maintaining and enhancing the biodiversity and geodiversity habitats and wildlife as an important aim of the PLDP. And I relate there to NE3, Bio and Geodiversity 4.53 and 4.49. My third point will be, according to the PLDP NE 4.43, the Council is required to consider local perceptions regarding land use. This is a highly sensitive area. It has 3 environmental protections upon it, 2 of which are international. The Ramsar, the SPA and the SSI. It is also within the Galloway Hills Regional Scenic Area. We have SNH maps showing the areas, and I'm very pleased to hear Mr. Clapworthy say at the very beginning that the Council has satisfied itself as to where these boundaries are, because my goodness, have we had a map muddle? Or have we had a map model? These are the SNH maps. Ramsar area, first of all, flick on. I think there's 2 of those. SPA area, you can see clearly where the site is marked with the cross. Flip on to SSI area, again, the whole of this site that they propose to build on is within these areas. If we move on to the next map, which whiz on quickly. Time is passing. We go to the Stewartly Development Plan map, please. Thank you. Okay. This was mentioned earlier. I appreciate this is a settlement boundary map, not necessarily one that is purely showing protective area. However, this has led to a muddle because Environmental Protected Area 43 there is marked out quite differently to SNH maps. And the protective area actually extends beyond that settlement boundary line. But you do not note in there that it's Area 43. Move on swiftly to the next one. This one is a point that was made by the RSPB. It was claimed by them that this area was taken out of this designation in 1992, and they based it on this map. It's a very, very old map. It's almost like it's been drawn by a little kid, and there's no way there that you can see clearly where the division is. And an assumption has been made by RSPB that it's been taken out of SPA and Ramsar. However, it has been clarified today that this site is totally within Ramsar, SPA and SSI areas. Okay, if we can move on, please. Now, our concerns are that the environmental issues here have been glossed over. I appreciate to a large extent that SNH and RSPB are statutory bodies and they have statutory regulations to follow. And this means sometimes that even the language they use, they're a little bit restricted in its use. However, we move on. We have to decide here, are the birds which are specifically protected for this area, and I'll come to this in a moment, they're the Icelandic greylag and the Greenland white-fronted. Now, there was a question earlier about what particular bird was in this area. Can I just explain? If I use this table, this is the whole of Loch Ken and River Dee protection area. Right? You have, it comes as a whole. You can't compartmentalise it. You can't say that you can have a greylag goose there and it doesn't ever go somewhere else in that whole area. You can't say that the kingfisher, and I know we've zoomed in a bit, or the SNH and RSPB have zoomed in on just the geese. This area protects kingfishers, tufted ducks, mallards, all whooper swans, dragonflies of all sorts, and all manner of flora and fauna with fancy Latin names that I can't possibly pronounce. But the whole area is protected for the whole of those species, not just for one little goose in one little corner. Right? They have to be free to move. They have to choose. And we have changing climate. We have changing seasons. We have changing availability of certain foodstuffs that these creatures feed upon. It's constantly changing. And these creatures choose where on their protected area they go, where it best suits them in any one particular area in one particular year. Now, SNH, in their letter of 1st of May, have concluded there's no significant effect on this. The letter gives no reasons as to why they came to that conclusion. It's presumed they have reasons for saying it's unlikely that the development will significantly increase disturbance to wintering geese, either directly or indirectly. And again, I bring your attention to the fact they focus just on geese. There are many more things. The letter doesn't mention the distribution of the species within the site. Right, now, what happened to our screen there with the conservation issues? That's very important. Thank you. Conservation objectives. To determine if there is a significant effect on the qualifying interest, we have to look at why the site has been designated. There it is. Lots and lots of different reasons, not just that one reason specified by SNH. I would draw Council's attention to the first one, avoid deterioration of the habitats. And then further down, you will see distribution of the species within the site. That's actually what I've just been talking about. Okay? Now, their letter doesn't mention the distribution of the species within the site. I'm going to mention it because we have to avoid deterioration of the habitat. It's a prime aim of this council. It's a prime aim of Scottish Challenge for 2020 documentation. And we didn't meet our targets for it before. So here's hoping we do a bit better now. Cutting sections out of the habitat alone shows deterioration. And I'm talking about, here's Loch Ken and River Dee. Here we have Crossmichael. Here we have our wee site. It's as important as all the rest. You chop that out. You're chopping out the choice of all these creatures of where they go, what they can eat. If we keep cutting away our special areas, no matter how small, the value of the whole becomes less and less. Can we have the next screen, please? The grey lags on the ridge, RSPB say they do not use it. Yes, they do. There they are. On that site, on the ridge. There are many, many more pictures of them, but we couldn't get them through to you. They were blocked on the system, so we settled for the one. They have now been prevented from going there by a new fence which has been put up, and one wonders if they had permission to put that fence up, because you do need permission from SNH to put a fence up just on an SSI area, never mind one that's internationally protected. SNH continued with flaw advice in their letter. The proposed development is small scale in relation to the scale of the designated site. The conservation objectives are not interested in only part of the site. Have we still got our conservation objectives up there, please? Thank you. But in the distribution of the species on the site. In other words, the site should be managed and protected so that they are found across it. Grey lags have historically concentrated on estuaries in winter, where they fed on water plants. However, more recently they've adapted almost exclusively to using agricultural areas. Excuse me. Near favoured roost sites. Grasses form the majority of the winter diet, and without going into vast detail about most desirable foodstuffs, habitats, etc., suffice it to say it's important to avoid deterioration of the habitat. This site may be thought to be small, but it is still protected. The wildlife need all the bits of habitat to provide choice and cover in varying seasonal conditions, and these are never the same from year to year. I quote from Aim 1 of the Local Biodiversity Plan. In order to allow biodiversity to adapt to the predicted changes in climate, there is a requirement to increase the scale at which biodiversity management is carried out. If the Council is sincere in its aim, then consistent and proper land management should be followed. We can now move on to the next screen, please. I don't think that was the next screen. I think we had one on Greenland White Fronted showing, contrary to RSPB's statement, they say there are no Greenland White Fronted near this site. They are. Have we got that? Please, it is rather important. Well, I don't know, can I maybe just describe it to you then? I do have a copy of it here somewhere, but of course I'm not allowed to pass that round, am I? No? All right. Oh well, I'll just have to try and describe it then. There was a survey carried out in 2009 to 2011. It was a survey carried out involving some of our own local experts. Dr. Larry Griffin was one. I have been on the phone to him and checking all this out. There have been Greenland white-fronted geese found on the other side of Riverside Lane. Now, from that road there, you would walk along and down a path, and about maybe 100 yards further along, Greenland white-fronted have been found there. Now, Greenland white-fronted are very near extinction. We really have to take as much care as we possibly can to preserve that particular species. And this field, that little site on this field, just could provide that wee bit extra to entice them. The Greenland white-fronted have also been found just in front of the Ayres Farm. Arthur Thirlwell, another local expert on these birds who's monitored them for about the last 40 years, has stated that. Now, where are we? If we can, how am I doing for time?
You have 6 minutes remaining.
Oh, well, that's not too bad, I suppose. Okay. I'm not sure, actually, I need to take up the full time, to be honest. I mean, we have established this is fully protected, so there should not be a development on it. Anyway, we will move on. Can we have the next screen, please? Okay, this was taken way back in 2006 by one of our neighbours. It shows the state of the land at that time. At that time, numbers of both species of geese, if we really must concentrate on geese, was fairly high. The numbers are low now, getting lower. The grey lags are down to about 300. No, that's the Greenland white-fronted, are down to about 300. They form just the 1% required for this status. The grey lag are a wee bit better off because they're on the IUCN scale as stable. But numbers generally are falling. So we have to take extra care with our land management. This was taken way back when numbers were high. Land looks quite good. Next screen, please. 20, oh, it's not very clear, is it? Never mind, never mind. I think you get the general idea. The land has deteriorated on this one. The 2014 one, please. Oh, even worse image. Oh, my goodness. Oh, right. Ah, there we are. Yes, that's protected land. 2014, please. That's the protected land. Would you believe it? Are they allowed to put that faraway fence there? Did they receive consent for that? Look at that pile of rubble that's been dumped there. Is that any condition to keep a protected piece of land in? If we could open the curtains again, please, and we continue. Thank you so much. Right. Better land management is called for here. And in the pictures you had at the beginning where you surveyed round the whole field, you will see that there were two sections down at the bottom where land management was being carried out as it should have been. The farmer obviously is trying his hardest to keep those two areas down the bottom as it should be. I wonder if in the process of this land being passed from one owner to another, that any duty or responsibility for land management has been passed over to it, because it doesn't seem to me that it has. In essence, I will conclude. This is a highly sensitive area, and it's recognised as such by many of the villagers. Most are concerned about the wildfowl and preserved land, some with detracting from the character of the amenity, and you would see that probably in the petitions that were handed in. These people, and I'm sure probably others in the village, recognise this as a valuable commodity to the village, and every inch of it is precious, not just the present-day protected species, all manner of wildlife, flora, fauna that inhabit the whole of Lough Ken and River Dee, but also perhaps to potential future protected species. And as custodians, it is our duty to not only maintain the biodiversity, but also to enhance it. I would therefore urge you to overturn any approval to build on this site and vote for refusal in order to halt the loss of biodiversity and respect local perceptions regarding land use. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that.
Are there any questions?
Any member have any questions for Angela? Councillor Crothers and Councillor Hislop.
Thanks, Chairman. It's just a straightforward question again in regards to the close proximity of the geese. How close do they come? I'm looking at you've got number 23, 22, 21, 20, 19, 16 and 15 that looks at that are close, and you've got the sewage works as well. So how, you're talking about
how close do they come?
How do they come up towards this actual site as it stands?
Right, as it stands, they don't quite come up to the fence at the road. They would come beyond where the sewage farm is, maybe about 5-6 yards this side of it. So they would actually be on the site. And they have been spotted there by a number of neighbours, one of whom actually said that at a local council meeting.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Hislop.
Thank you. Ms Pearcey, you provided us with the evidence that the geese have been on site. Could you give us an idea of when that photograph was and what other buildings were in existence at the time?
Right, that was 2 years ago and no other buildings were in existence then.
Thanks for that, Councillor Hislop.
Other photos have been more recent. There was one last year taken with them up on that very spot that I mentioned to you. Any other
Councillor
questions?
Diggle.
Thank you. Just on page 31, under the RSP B8, no objections, I won't read it all out, but it does say that it is for this reason that the site is excluded from the SPA and the Ramsar wetland
We
site.
have clarified... oh, sorry.
I haven't asked you a question yet.
Oh, sorry.
Are you saying they're wrong?
I am saying it's an assumption that has been made to the very old map that we put up on the screen. There was a wee, or supposed to be a wee circle on it, indicating SSI areas. But it's a very, very old map. It's a scale of 1 to 50,000, and there was debate about where that circle was. And we did mention in advance about this point, and we asked the council, as the primary responsibility body under EU law, to satisfy itself as to where the boundary of these protected areas were. And that was done right at the very beginning by Mr Clapworthy.
Peter?
Can I maybe suggest that the RSP have consulted the up-to-date maps and they are in actual fact correct rather than your supposition on old maps?
No, I think you'll find on the Register of Scotland maps and on JNCC maps, the Biodiversity Network maps, that those coincide with SNH map boundaries.
Thanks for that, Peter. Any other member for Angela? In that case, if you'd like to return to your seat, please, and thank you very much for your presentation. Members are now in session. Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks, Chairman. Just in regards to some of the questions that were asked, I'd just like to pick up on some. Maybe Dean could possibly just bring them into context. Story and a half house doesn't conform with the existing policy, I think was said by the first. I've got a few here, so maybe get a chance to take a note. Just if you could put that into context with what's there and what a story and a half would look like in regards to the rest of the site. The private roads should be reinstated by the developers, what I was saying after. Just if you could put that into context as well, if there's anything that the planning authority could do in regards to that. I think it was also by the second representation, the open space should be protected as proposed by the Scottish reporter. There's a response back, just if you could touch on that as well, please, Dean. A definition of open space in this context is, because I think open space, maybe there's a bit of confusion there, I'd like to get a clear understanding of what's been referred to, General Policy 43 and different things. The last point, the last representative got confirmed anything that I needed for there. So that's the points. If we could get them answered, please, Chairman.
Thanks, Ian. Okay. Dean, have you got these different points?
If you don't mind, you may have to remind me of each point as, chronologically, but I'll start with the first point. Which I've immediately forgotten because I was trying to remember the last points. Oh, the 1.5 story.
That's right.
There's a reference to the fact that they've indicated in the application that it's for 1.5 story, and I've referred to it at paragraph 4.9. I've made the point that whilst they've indicated that it might be 1.5 stories, I've kind of made the point that to specifically restrict it from this point may not be, may be unnecessary because there'd be a requirement for a subsequent application where there'd be an assessment of the design, the scale, the position within the site and the materials and so on, and its level on the site. So to restrict it at this point, simply because every other house is a bungalow, I've tried to make the point that sometimes a bit of variety can make a street or a place a bit more interesting and to add that variety. But there's still a requirement for a follow-up assessment should a further application come in if this one is approved. Second point is a private road. The roads department commented on their interests where the private road hits the public road, which is out of view on the images I've shown you. So as far as damage is concerned, should that happen, is between the private owners of the road and the developer, and it's not for the planning authority to get involved in that. The third point is about the open space. I've sought clarification on this. The reporter did come back on the 5th of June, I think the objector mentioned, with a recommendation that that land between Crossmichael and the loch is protected as open space, whereas presently that's protected as a local area of environmental importance, so it's a different allocation. However, the council have since gone back to the reporter to clarify where we will draw that boundary, and the site and an area of land to the immediate south of the site would fall within the settlement boundary as indicated on the proposed LDP. So the open space allocation would not affect this site. The site would fall entirely within the settlement boundary, and the open space allocation, once finalised, would not affect the site.
And was the last in a sense of place? Is that what you're looking for in your final one?
I think he's actually covered it there. There's 2 points in open space about the reporter, and it was in context with the reporter General Policy 43, but I think he covered both points with the last comment there. Thank you, Chairman.
Good for that. Any other question? Councillor McKee?
You're not very sure there, Chair, are you? These, to me, what that lady was saying about the edge of these designated areas, you can't just draw a line and say, right, the birds are not allowed over that. Or if they do come over, that makes it part of the protected area. And in all probability, the edge of the local development plan for the area is the edge of the water, because you can't build on water unless you can something like that, innit? And that's probably right as well. But it's difficult to come out and say one's right and one's wrong. As I say, there can't be an edge where you say, right, that's the wildlife site, and anything over that. Sometimes we get plan permission required, and it's about 1.5 miles or 1.5 kilometres for the edge of the designated site, which is totally different. But you're talking about a few feet here, and that makes it very difficult to make it what might be called a common sense decision.
I think the officer's given you his view in a common sense approach, and it's up to you whether you accept that or not. We are in session. Any other members? Councillor Hislop?
Chair, under 2.5 RSPB, no objections. Wintering geese are not known to roost or forage. We've seen evidence that they do forage. Would the RSPB change their objection on, or their terms of what they say in objection, if they knew that there was evidence that the geese actually do inhabit that area for some part of the time?
Well, we're not in a position to speculate what RSPB might or might not do. Dean?
The statutory consultee in this process is SNH. RSPB provided a comment via an approach from the applicant because we hadn't had an SNH comment up to that point, and so we got a comment from RSPB. But it's SNH who are the statutory consultee who then subsequently provided their comment. What they've said, and they've confirmed, and as we've confirmed today, the site does fall within the designated sites, but then there's an assessment of the impact of the proposal on the designation. And the SNH comment does acknowledge well, what it says is it's not known to be used regularly by the qualifying interests. That, if you read them between the lines, they're not saying it's never used, they're saying it's not a regular spot. And so their assessment is that the proposal doesn't undermine the designation.
Councillor Maitland and then Councillor McCaughtry.
Well, I think if we took an incremental approach and every time we thought, oh, that's just a wee bit, and that's another wee bit, and that's another wee bit, and that's yet another wee bit, we wouldn't have any of these sites left. I've been quite interested. I think I've probably changed my mind as I've listened to what's been happening. I think there are two issues here. I'd like Dean's help with respect to the ability to conform with the pattern of development, because there's a constraint with respect to that sewage pipe. That's the first issue. And the second issue is that clearly these are protected areas. And it seems to me that I think there's an element of doubt in here. It's crept in, to be honest. And I think one's got to be quite cautious about this. But I'd like to go back, please, to the issue of constraint. If we look at the map on page 27, that's of our papers. And then I wonder, Chairman, if you wouldn't mind, I'm sorry about this, but if we could close the curtains and look at the proposal about where the layout's going to be and have a look and see. I have to say, I would have said that the way that the building would have to be down to the southwest of the plot might mean that I'm not absolutely convinced that it can satisfy the requirements of our policy.
I'm sure Dean will respond, but the first point is that it's only a plan application in principle at this stage. Dean, would you like to address both of Jane's points, please?
Okay, just to clarify about the point about ambiguity, there isn't any. It does fall, the site entirely falls within the ecological designation and partially within the current local plan policy for local areas of environmental importance. I can never get that one the right way around. And that designation relates to about 30 to 40% of the site at the back end. So that area, the settlement boundary is drawn from that corner there across, and I can never get my hand to stay still. It's not a squiggly line, it's a straight line. About 40% of the bottom left. So that's just to clarify those matters.
Clarify them again, Dean.
Okay. The entire site, as it hatched in grey, or coloured in grey, falls within the international and national designations, Ramsar, SPA, SSSI. The bottom area, from that point there in the neighbouring garden across, falls within the GP43, the area of local environmental importance, as currently designated in the local plan, which clearly is going to get superseded with a new Crossmichael inset map in the proposed LDP. The reporter has come back on that proposed settlement line, and the line, as suggested by the reporter, and as the position that was promoted by the council, is there. So this area here, and the area here, is proposed by the reporter to be protected open space. The site clearly falls entirely out with that suggested protected area, because that's where the boundary will be. And that's the reporters clarified that that's their position. So all this area here will fall within the white land, falling within Crossmichael settlement boundary. I think there was another point about, is that covered that?
The other point was about whether or no the sewage pipe or the installation, and that's why I was saying it's at this moment it's only in principle, but can you just deal with it, please?
That's the line of the sewage pipe. And Scottish Water, nothing's come back in the consultation response that said they should not build over the sewage pipe. It said that any proposed development should protect their assets and ensure that their interests are protected. Whether it's a technical solution to allow a house to be built nearer or partially over the sewage pipe, that's not information that's come to us. But what I do know is the neighbouring properties built with the corners touching or partially over or just at the point of the sewage pipe below. If the house was to be positioned 2 metres back, because that's what we've been told is a clearance requirement, then clearly that will be the building line of any proposed house. But if we go to the location plan, you'll see that houses vary on the building line. The nearer to the road there, that one's more set back, and then so on. So there is variety on the building line. Even if the clearance of 2 metres from the sewage pipe was required and there wasn't another technical solution, I suggest we do not recommend that that would be contrary to the development pattern on that street.
Satisfied, Councillor Maitland?
Not totally, but fine.
Councillor McCaughtry?
Thank you, Chairman. I think I would refer to the 25 RSPB, where they point out the land concerned is not of significance to qualifying interests of either the SSI or the SPA, being relatively small in area and of improved farmland between existing dwellings. It's for this reason the site is excluded from the SPA and Ramsar wetland site. If you go to the top of the page there, which is actually the 2.4C response from SNH, so it says that the proposal will not affect the interest as the development is not within a park site and will be used regularly by wintering geese, not occupied by other identified natural heritage interests. But a point I make is when you're looking at that bit of ground there, if it was a rare orchid that can look after itself, then you might want to say you want to protect that bit of ground because you've got a rare flower there. If it was an atterjack toad, as we've done in other parts of the area, what we're talking about here is birds. Now, man might draw lines on the map. Birds don't read maps, and birds don't know which side of the line they're going to go and feed on. If the grass isn't good enough, they'll go elsewhere. It doesn't matter what we designate as human beings or what we decide as humans. This is a site of special scientific interest for birds. If the food ain't there, the birds ain't going to go there. They'll fly over the fence and go to the next nearest bit of ground. So quite frankly, I see nothing wrong with the recommendation here, Chairman, and I would move that we grant this application.
Okay, any other member? Councillor Diggle?
I'll second that.
Okay, any other member otherwise minded? In that case, Gillian, will you announce the member's decision? Councillor McComb.
Thanks, Chair. As far as I'm concerned, if you designate land for protection, you honour the designation. This area is protected under 3 headings: Ramsar, SSI and SPA. Now, you either go with that designation and refuse this application, or you simply turn your back on the designation and say it's no longer important. I would move that we refuse this application on the grounds that the land is protected.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Crothers.
Chairman, I think I just have to make clear what my views are, and it's in regards to, I mean, it's been a motion put forward, and I would agree with that motion. I think it should be approved today, and I would substantiate that because of what's forthcoming, what the council's already agreed to in principle. We're looking to remove this as a designated area, protected area, I should say. And I would agree. I've had all the points that were raised. I've had my points of clarity on that. There's not much we can really do about that. I take into consideration what Councillor Maitland's saying in regards to the building line, the sewage pipeline. That maybe I would like it as close to that sewage pipeline, or that sewage pipeline being the actual building line as possible. I think it should be as far forward as we could get, but I don't think we condition that either because it's only an outline or a plan in principle we're looking at, and that'll come back to either through detailed matters or a further application. So for that reason, in case there is an amendment that gets passed, I just want to justify why I'm going forward with the approval.
Okay, that's fine. Councillor Maitland.
Could I have clarification, please? The report, the council asked for the line of the boundary line to cut across the application site. Is that correct? So that's what the council has currently agreed, and the reporter has suggested that it should be further out. Can I be absolutely clear about that? So,
Dean? Can we shut the curtain again, girls, just so we're absolutely clear of what we're saying here, please?
This is an extract provided by the objector. It's out. It relates to the Shrewsbury local plan. Just to make the point, this was of the finalised local plan. It wasn't ultimately the adopted local plan because, for example, that housing site ended up being different. But as far as this side of Crossmichael is concerned, it remained the same when it eventually was adopted as the map for Crossmichael. That area there is around the area of the site. There's the sewage works. That, you can't make it out very clearly, but part of the site falls, that's the settlement boundary line there. All this land here is local environmental importance, but within the settlement boundary. So if you like, any development within that area is in the settlement, but you have to take the appropriate, safeguards. Part of the site falls within that part of the settlement boundary, and about 30-40% just overlaps there into GP43. As far as the proposed local development plan is concerned, I haven't got an image, I've only got a printout myself, but to relate it back to the location plan, just to cross-relate the Shrewsbury local plan, that is in GP43, so that was the line I was referring to. Everything's in the settlement boundary, but this area falls within no other constraint as far as local plan policy is concerned. That area is GP43. As far as with regard to the report and the LDP suggests a larger settlement area is falling within the settlement, but no other constraining allocation, and that follows that line there. So all this, the line follows there along the lock side, including the sewage farm up there, and then up this road, and then following that boundary. And the reporter suggested and agreed that falls in the settlement in the proposed LDP map, and then this area here that's currently in GP43 up to that boundary, and then that area falls within protected open space. We don't have an equivalent policy for local environmental importance in the proposed LDP. So the whole site and additional land that's currently farmland falls within the settlement boundary with no other constraining local plan designation or local development plan designation.
Satisfied?
Yes,
Councillor
actually,
Maitland?
I think that was very helpful. I don't think it's helpful for what I want to do, but I think it was helpful. Thank you.
Can you open the curtain again, please, Colonel? Well, we have a motion by Councillor McCaughty to agree the officer's recommendation. That's seconded by Councillor Diggle. We have an amendment to refuse by Councillor McComb, who does not yet have a seconder. Councillor Hislop.
Chair, I'll second Councillor McComb. I think one of the things that sort of turned me towards it was this: if you start nibbling at the side, you keep moving and moving, because the geese will not come closer to the site where it is if there's been geese there before. It is a Ramsar site, an SI, etc. So I'll support Councillor McComb.
Thanks for that. In that case, Gillian, may you take us through the process, please?
Thank you, Chair. I think if I've understood Councillor McComb and Councillor Hislop correctly, the amendment is a refusal on ground that the land is in a protected area. Could I possibly get some guidance just from Mr Suttian as to that?
David?
I'd suggest you probably just expand on that to make it clear that it's got the specific international designations that you've indeed referred to, so Ramsar, SAC, SSSI. If you're making it clear that it's that designation, that would be fine.
You happy to add that to your amendment, Councillor McComb? Councillor Hislop? Okay, thanks. Gillian then?
Thank you, Chair. We have a motion from Councillor McCaughty seconded by Councillor Diggle, to approve the application subject to the conditions detailed in the report. And we have an amendment by Councillor McComb, seconded by Councillor Hislop, to refuse the application on ground that the land is in a protected area, specifically in relation to international designated area. Councillor Dempster.
Motion.
Councillor Blake.
Amendment.
Councillor Crothers.
Motion.
Councillor Diggle. Councillor Dryborough.
Motion.
Councillor Geddes.
Motion.
Councillor Groom.
Motion.
Councillor Hislop.
Amendment.
Councillor Maitland.
Amendment.
Councillor McCawtrey.
Motion.
Councillor McComb.
Amendment.
Councillor McCutcheon.
Motion.
Councillor McKee.
Amendment.
Councillor Ogilvie.
Amendment.
Councillor Thompson.
Amendment.
Councillor Witts.
Amendment.
We have 8 votes for the motion, 8 for the amendment. Therefore, I would ask if the Chair wishes to use his casting vote.
Yes, for the motion.
Thank you, Chair. Therefore, the application has been approved, subject to the terms, the conditions detailed in the report. Thank you.
Come to item 7, which I've declared an interest in. We'll have a half-hour recess, and I'll ask Gillian to find a chair for item 7. We'll come back at 1:15. Thank you.
The Planning Applications Committee, I can confirm that we are quorate for this afternoon. The next item requires an appointment of a chairperson, so I'd like to take nominations for this. Councillor Hislop.
Could I nominate Councillor Dryborough?
Councillor Dryborough. You've been appointed chairperson for this one item.
Thank you very much, members. We're going on to item number 7 on the Plan Application Committee, which is a consultation regarding an application made under Section 36 of the Electricity Act 1989 for the erection of 30 wind turbines up to 80 metre hub height and up to 125 metres blade type height and associated infrastructure at Knowe Wind Farm, Kirkconnel, Sanquhar. The application is a type S36 consultation, and Dean Clarkworth is the case officer. Dean, if you want to take us through, thanks.
Thank you. If I could just update members as to the recommendation. The recommendation at 5.11.
Page 67.
Yes, page 67. I'm told. On the 5th line, well, if you take the end of the 4th line, it says adversely impact upon visual and residential amenity. We're offering an amendment to that recommendation to remove the words and residential because we've re-scrutinised the residential amenity study that was submitted with the amendment to the proposal, and we're in agreement with the conclusions that the proposal wouldn't unacceptably impact upon residential amenity. So by removing those 2 words, the reference to our recommendation on residential impact on residential amenities removed from our recommendation to yourselves. Do we need the curtains? Okay, that's the site shaded in grey. It's around 1.6 kilometres east of the council boundary with East Ayrshire, around 1.9 kilometres east of west, of the nearest parts of Kirkconnel and Kellerholm, which you can see in the right-hand mid part of the map there. The nearest dwelling to any turbine would be 690 metres, a property called Courtyard. That's the proposed site layout as amended. The amendment included sort of minor resiting of 8 turbines, generally within about 50 metres or so, and repositioning of some of the tracks and hard-on areas, but it's not too far off the original submission and the same number of turbines and same height. So, typical turbine elevation. They haven't chosen a candidate turbine as yet, but it will be up to these maximum dimensions, which is 125 metres to tip, 90 metre rotor diameter with an 80 metre high hub, tubular tower in the usual blades. That's a typical image of a substation and compound. That will be sited in the bottom left there. You can see it the hatched area in well, it's next to the site compound in this area here. That's the zone ZTV obviously it's theoretical, so it assumes a bare earth scenario, so it's a maximum visibility to tip. Obviously it doesn't take into account obstructions such as vegetation, buildings and so on. If you can, the visibility is largely constrained by uplands and higher ground to the south and to the north, and the visibility is largely along the valley floor there, sort of in a east-west direction. That's the same, but that's just to hub height, broadly similar, but less visibility. Just to take you through some of the images that are supplied in the environmental statement, because they're much better than the images we can provide because they superimpose the turbines on them. This is from a position at Libery Moor, the footpath that crosses the moor, just not far short of the proposed site access into the wind farm site. That's a present situation. That's the situation with what they call a photo wire, just imposing graphics of the proposed turbines on the image, and then ultimately a photo montage which shows the situation with actual turbines. That's around 885 metres from the nearest turbine. This is from a position along the A76, around 1.3 kilometres from the site. To the north of the site, you can see the A76 there, just on the left. That's the current situation, and this is just about one of the nearest points along the A76. There's the situation with the photo wire, situation with the turbines. This is from the same position, just panning to the right from the previous, so looking in a more southerly direction, more directly into the site. That's the current situation. That's the photo wire situation. And that's the situation with the turbines. This is, as I say, 1.3 kilometres from the site. This is a position close to the southern part of the settlement of Kellerholm, 2.5 kilometres from the nearest proposed turbine. So that's the current situation. That's the situation with the turbines. There's a photo wire. And that's the situation with the turbines. As I say again, 2.5 kilometres from the nearest turbine. And then this is a situation from the north side on the opposite side of the valley, St Connell's Church, around 4.2 kilometres from the site. You're looking towards the site, just about central image there. Photo wire of the full extent of the proposed wind farm. and that's the proposed wind farm as it would be viewed in reality. The full assessment set out in the report. The report raises some serious concerns, particularly from the council's landscape architect and from the council's archaeologist, and we've offered a recommendation to raise an objection to the proposal to Scottish ministers. Don't think I've got anything else to add at this point.
Members, there's no public speaking at this, but any questions on clarification or anything on the photographs, first of all, and then please raise your hands. Councillor McKee.
Do we have a map, a photo montage with a cumulative effect in that area of other turbines?
It's always a difficulty in extracting images from the ES because...
You know how we have the green crosses and whatnot? Yeah, have you anything like that?
No, that's often why we produce it ourselves. What this ES did, it produced an awful lot of images as photo wires of the cumulative situation on the ground, so you could see one wind farm as it overlaps another and distance. But because of the distance of setback of view in order to give the example, as far as images goes on here, it's very difficult to actually make anything out. So that's why I've specifically excluded it. The information is in the submission, but it wouldn't really work as a projection on the wall.
Okay, that's fine, thanks.
Councillor Dick.
Thanks, Chair. Could you maybe explain to me exactly what the objection from the archaeologist is? When I read this here, there doesn't seem to be anything that specifically says to me that that it's going to impact on any sites of archaeological value. I'd just like your comments on that, please, Dean.
Is everybody happy we open the curtains at the moment? Thanks.
The archaeologist's comments set out 2.5 and run for 3 and a bit sides. I would struggle to summarise those in a way that can express what she's trying to say. The consultation summary is the summary of what she said. To try and take those 3 and a bit sides and really express to you in a nutshell where she's come out, I'll be honest, I'd struggle greatly.
Chair, could I maybe try? Page 53, I think, is probably the bit down there where it's assessment and recommendation. It's the high ranking of the proposal cited with regard to the archaeology and settlement landscape. Sensitivity criteria is supported by the adverse effects on the cultural heritage evidence in the ES. Then she goes on to the proposal will have adverse effect on the setting of old St Connell's Church, burial ground and miners' monument of moderate significance, and considers that to be at odds with the Structure Plan Policy E12. Significant cumulative adverse impact with consented wind farms, and then there's a list of the other ones there. Finally, over the page, concludes that the proposal will result in significant indirect effects on historic environment that are assessed as adverse and may affect cultural identity. The effects cannot be mitigated. So it's clear from what she's saying there's not a direct effect. That's in paragraph 2.52. It's not saying that there's any actual effect on any archaeological interest on the site. It's the effect on the setting of other ones that I think seems to be the key concern.
Councillor Dick.
Thanks. So really, in essence, what we're saying is when you say there's no direct effect, it's not going to be destructive physically of any archaeological sites. It's a visual impact, essentially.
I just like you. I mean, I've watched this thing since it kicked off, and there's been a lot of consultation with the local community on this particular thing, and I think the advantages of it is far outweighs the disadvantages of it. And with regard to the S36 consultation, if we are to go with the recommendations, it is with with reference to the recommendation in the report. If, however, members feel differently, the application, or should I say the recommendation, still require why we're raising no objection if that is to be the case.
Because you're not actually the determining body on this one, it's the Scottish Government, it's maybe not quite the same as having to actually record why you would be making an exception to policy, as if you were the planning authority. All that would effectively go forward to the Scottish ministers would be the fact that the council is not objecting. If we do object, it triggers a public inquiry, and we've got to explain why, as a council, we're objecting. What I would request is that if you are minded to not object to it, there's a clear view that this is contrary to the council's adopted policy, the IPP, on wind farm issues. It would be useful to have something from yourselves as to why you were making an exception to the agreed council policy on that, and why this would not then cause us difficulties for somebody else coming back and saying, but in the case of Sandy now, you made an exception to your existing policy. If you can explain why, it would certainly help with those cases.
Councillor Garris.
We're in session, sir, are we?
Are there any further questions for the officer on clarification? We're in session. Councillor Maitland.
My apology, because you did ask me, and I'm sorry. I am not absolutely clear, because there are cumulative maps on the website. I'm not entirely clear why we haven't got one, because I think we have had this sort of thing up beforehand. So it would be helpful to know why we're not having a map up, as Councillor McKee's asked. And I'm going on to say, well, we've had it before, so why not now?
Fair point. Yes, I think it probably should have been done and should have been included in the presentation, but I'm afraid that was just an oversight in this one.
Okay, we're in session then, Councillor Garris.
Well, I would go back to the points, the comments that Councillor Dick and obviously yourself have raised, sir, and let me make it abundantly clear that I am basically very much I'm very much in sympathy with these, and with the greatest of deference to Mr Sutty, I mean, provided that my motion is accepted as competent, I would simply move, in fact, that we raise no objections to these proposals.
Councillor Dick.
I would second it, and on this basis, with reference to paragraph, find it, 1.5, it references the fact that there are no residential properties located within the application site. The fact that you've advised us that you're removing the residential amenity from the recommendation, I think it gives it a whole new character. That site map, which indicated the visibility, and I appreciate that doesn't take into account of obstructions, but it seems to me that there's very few, compared to some of the maps I've seen before, there are very few places where you can actually see this, so the visibility is to my mind, fairly limited. I appreciate too that there is always an element of subjectivity, but if it's if we are going as I'm seconding this motion on the basis that it's contrary to certain council policies, I would say it's on the basis of some subjectivity and the relative isolation of the site.
Councillor Hislop.
Chair, I think have in place council policy with officers who feel that this is actually contrary to policy, and I would just move the recommendations as are in the paper at 5.1.
Councillor Maitland.
Yeah, I'm happy to second that. I think it's incumbent upon us to follow our own policies. I do understand quite clearly that there have been representations made by communities, but this is a regulatory matter, and we have to look at what we've agreed through the council process, Chairman. And that, to my mind, actually does outweigh representations on community benefit. So from my point of view, I feel very strongly that we should set those aside, be blind to that and consider our own policies. And I am quite happy, given the information we've seen and the zone of theoretical visibility, to follow along with what Councillor Hislop has suggested.
Thank you, Councillor McCourtry, Councillor Geddes, Councillor Diggle, Councillor Carruthers.
That's fine, Chair. I was looking for something in the papers, but I found it.
Okay, Councillor Geddes.
Well, for the record, sir, I have made no reference to the issue of community benefit. That is not a planning consideration, and that should not be taken into consideration before this committee today.
Councillor Diggle.
I'm not totally clear why you've taken out and residential amenity on the recommendations on page 67. Could you just explain that again, please?
It was, can refer you to page 64. When the report was originally drafted, I think probably too much weight was given to the comments in paragraph 4.46, which was the landscape architect's view on the effect on residential amenity, really by virtue of the visual impact, if you like, on the properties nearby. Now, any development like that is going to have an impact on the residential amenity by just visual proximity. Then we looked at it again in terms of what the environmental health officers were saying, paragraph 4.47, and they really weren't objecting to it. So just on reflection, when we looked at it again, we did think that maybe it wasn't, if we're going to be going to a public inquiry on this, objecting to it, there probably wasn't the robustness of argument in terms of residential amenity. It was the landscape architect's comments that we were maybe giving too much weight to and not those of the environmental health officer. So for that reason, we're happy to take away these two words.
Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks, Chairman. I've looked at this, and after what we've seen in regards to the presentation, I think it lies in a valley. Its visual impact will be limited because of that. You do see east to west, fair enough, the impact is across there, but again, we're in right up the A76 corridor. That is an industrial area, as we've certainly classed it as, and for those reasons, I would certainly support it. I think it must tie in with the regional economic strategy as well in regards to the local economic benefit and the wider economic benefits to Dumfries and Galloway. So I'll certainly be supporting that. We don't object, Chairman, in regards to this one.
Thanks very much. For me, it lies virtually in the paragraphs 4.15 and 4.16, page 58, that the policy on rural development is contained in paragraphs 92 and 97 of the SPP. The SPP indicates that by taking a positive approach to new development, planning authorities can help but to create the right conditions for rural businesses and communities to flourish. The aim should be to enable development in rural areas that supports prosperous and sustainable communities whilst protecting and enhancing environmental quality. And in 4.16, the overarching aim should be to support diversification and growth of the rural economy. I think this application actually does that. And again, I'll refer back to what I said before about the consultation that's actually been ongoing in that particular area. Councillor Gay.
Well, it's obvious, sir, there's a significant body of opinion of members that here today who are of a similar mind, and if it would make it any easier or more palatable for them, I would certainly be prepared, notwithstanding my earlier remarks, to incorporate the terms of these particular two paragraphs into it. My basic instinct is simply to say that we raise no objections, but as I say, if that would make it if it would make it more amenable, as it were, to colleagues of a like mind, I would have no problem, sir, incorporating paragraphs 4.1, 4.15 and 1.16 into the motion, if that's acceptable.
Councillor Dick.
And just for the record, I would accept that, and I think that would lend weight to the motion.
So we are at the moment with a motion from Councillor Geddes, supported by Councillor Dick, and then Councillor Hislop as an amendment. And was that seconded? By Councillor Maitland. Councillor McKee.
Thanks, Chair. You're talking about 416. The overarching aim should be to support diversification and growth. Do we have any proof that this is actually happening in areas, as we know, given that down in the west we're flooded with these things? Do we know if the areas are actually gaining through such structures being placed in their communities. I've my doubts. As we know, there's nothing manufactured here. Everything's transported in. I don't know how many local people get jobs out of it and how long they last. And that to me, that's economic benefit is permanent jobs. No jobs for a year or so till you build the turbines and then everything disappears, bar the turbines.
The only thing I can suggest is obviously there's a lot of emails and things flying about, but there's also been a big consultation by the company, and other people have been involved with looking at the economic benefits of an area that's deprived up in the Upper Nistdale area.
Just in case the planning officer is able to give any comment to that, that was all.
Dean, have you got anything to add to that?
Well, there's no the problem is no reporting back mechanism once you know, on the benefits on who the contracts will go to. There's no requirement to report back on that.
Councillor McComb.
Thanks, Chair. Could we go back to the viewpoint from the A76? I think it might have been A1. Yep. Now, the roads officer says that there is no objection. Is it not conceivable that that would be a considerable distraction to drivers on this busy trunk road? I would have thought there's a road safety objection on the basis of what we see here. Perhaps Dean could tell us how far the turbines actually are from the road.
In this image, it's 1.3 kilometres. So it's considerable distance as far as direct obstruction, you know, is concerned. And the roads officers offered no comment on whether seeing a development would distract drivers. There's often many distractions, obviously, in the environment.
David?
Just to make it clear, the local roads officer will be commenting on the actual construction of this. Because it is a trunk road, the A76, it's actually Transport Scotland that look after that. So their views on road safety would be passed directly to the determining authority, which is the Scottish Government.
Councillor McComb?
So the Transport Scotland views have not actually formed part of this report?
That's right. We can only look at, we're a consultee for this one, so we can only look at the local issues. But rest assured, Transport Scotland's views will be being passed to the Scottish Government as the decision maker.
Councillor McCutcheon, do you want to come in? No. Councillor Lockerbie?
Chair, I hear what people are saying, and if we're given more weight to the socioeconomic benefits of this, and the question was asked about once they've been built and those that's operating, what was the benefit? If we can't determine that here today, then maybe a report should come to policy or EE&I, whatever one is suitable, because I think that's a valid question. It's in the papers, so it's a material consideration. We've no way of knowing. I haven't anyway, and Councillor McKee clearly hasn't, of knowing we might determine this and others what the benefits are. I mean, because that's where the feeling of the committee is going today is that there is a big benefit there, but that's fine, and there may well be, but we've no way of knowing historically how that would happen. So I'm just asking if it's competent to bring a report to the appropriate committee of the ones that's been built and the jobs and the socioeconomic benefits we've gained so far with what is quite a lot of wind turbines in our area.
I wonder if it would be appropriate for E&I to ask Economic Regeneration what the benefits would actually be and take that to E&I committee as opposed to, I wonder if the clerk would note that as a potential forward to bring a report forward for that. Okay, so is there anybody else? So we have a motion and amendment.
Yes, we have a motion from Councillor Geddes, seconded by Councillor Dick, to raise no objection to the application. And we have an amendment from Councillor Hislop, seconded by Councillor Maitland, to raise an objection as detailed in the report.
Councillor?
No, I did say, sir, that with respect to Gillian, I did say that I was more than willing to incorporate the terms of paragraphs 4.15 and 4.16 into the motion, provided that that was acceptable, or to the other members who appeared to be amenable to not making any objections. And Councillor Dick, as I understood it, basically accepted that as well, sir.
Yeah.
Apologise, Councillor Geddes. The motion by yourself, seconded by Councillor Dick, was to raise no objection.
It would be, sir, something along, it would be, standing the policy on rural development, which is contained in paragraphs 92 to 97 of the SPP, that we raise no objections in relation to these particular proposals, given that they indicate the taking of a positive approach to new development, and will be of assistance, therefore, in encouraging, or will therefore be of assistance in helping the rural communities in that part of the region to flourish. And I think that would be, as far as I'm concerned, sir, I've not been told that what I'm proposing is incompetent, so I would leave it at that and make it paragraph 4.15 rather than 4.1516.
Go on, David, throw a spanner in the works.
Yeah. When this report was produced and published, it was correct, just to throw a spanner in the works, the new Scottish planning policy was published only on Monday. So I can't guarantee that the exact wording is now still correct. It almost certainly won't be. But I think the same thrust is definitely there. So I think you could just say that the supported by Scottish planning policy in terms of the economic benefit to the area, etc.
Councillor Geddes.
Mate, without wasting your time, sir, it makes my initial position all the more safe on that basis. Raise no objections, but no, seriously, in an effort to be, to be transparent, I'll go along with what Mr. Surtees is suggesting. Thank you.
Councillor McKee.
Should we not be able to prove that these things are, I'm not getting at anybody, but these items 415 and 416 are actually correct in that these things do happen when wind farms are developed in given areas? Do we no need to have proof that this actually happens before we can put it down as a condition? Is it maybe a condition we're putting in that will never ever happen?
I think the motion is to raise no objection, and that's the reasons why we're raising no objection. The amendment is to raise objection as in accordance with the report. The specifics of that, Davy, will be within paragraphs 92 and 97, or whatever the new paragraphs are in the SPP.
Well, could I follow on? I don't want to hurry up, but can we look for proof that these things actually happen? They're making statements here that they're taking a positive approach to new development plan. I thought it's going to help create the right conditions. Is there any way that we can prove that that has happened in the past? Given the amount of wind farms we've got in Dumfries and Galloway, I think it should be pretty easy to prove one way or the other.
Yeah, I think that's where Councillor Ogilvie was coming, saying we need a report to see where the actual effects are. Councillor Maitland, then Councillor Geddes and Councillor.
Well, I have great sympathy with what Councillor McKee is asking, and really a sense of alarm actually at picking and choosing individual applications which seem to be more acceptable for whatever reason, and I don't actually understand, policy-wise, Chairman, honestly, why this one, it is not in an area of search, it does not conform with our policies, and I don't understand why we're picking this one to say no problems, as opposed to objecting to other ones. This is the problem. We've got to be fair to the public. We've got to be transparent. And in all honesty, it's not clear to me in the debate at the moment as to why we're picking this one to go through, and why we will not then be faced with people saying, why did you select that? It's not clear why the council has taken this decision.
The discussion on paragraphs 4.15 and 4.16 have been clearly identified in the discussion that we've actually had. Councillor Geddes and Councillor...
Well, I would go back to the comment that Councillor McKee has made, sir. The wording in paragraph 4.15, as far as I'm concerned, is pretty carefully drawn. It's not saying that by taking a positive approach to new development planning authorities, it says nothing more than can help to create the right conditions. Now, that's a very careful choice of words. And at the end of the day, I have no difficulties, no problems with that. You cannot get a clear, incontrovertible guarantee that, that will be the case. Life's no like that, for those of us who have lived it, long enough. And I'm sure I put Councillor McKee in that same category as myself. So at the end of the day, that's part of the reason. And really, insofar as Councillor Maitland's comments are concerned, it's quite clear to me, as the mover of the motion, I have been told that the motion is competent. There's not going to be a meeting of minds between she and I. There very rarely, if ever, is. So at the end of the day, I would suggest, in fact, Chair, that I will adhere to just exactly what I would propose, and I had it duly seconded.
Councillor Dick, then Councillor McConnell.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's a sensible suggestion you made, that it's perhaps the job of economic development to look at what positive impacts can be identified as a result of any of these, either initial or ongoing. Circumstantially, I happen to know a number of businesses who have positively benefited. I'm quite sure many of us do here. Hotels, for example, have benefited directly, but it would be very helpful to be able to quantify it. I would just like to reiterate what I said about in seconding the motion, that there is always, to my mind, a thing of subjectivity over the visual impact. And to my mind, that site map made it fairly clear that that's probably the most limited visibility that I've seen in any map. And I would also cite the relative isolation of this particular one, in having seconded that. Thank you.
Councillor McCorry.
Chair, we've got a motion and amendment. They're both competent. Let's go on with the business. We're just going back over the same old hash again.
Okay, we'll go to the motion amendment.
Thank you. The motion by Councillor Geddes, seconded by Councillor Dick. No objection to application based incorporating paragraphs 4.15 and 4.16 from the report. And we have an amendment from Councillor Hislop, seconded by Councillor Maitland, to raise an objection to the application on the recommendation detailed in the report. Chair.
Motion.
Councillor Dick.
Motion.
Councillor Carruthers.
Motion.
Councillor Diggle. Councillor Geddes.
Motion.
Councillor Groom.
Motion.
Councillor Hislop.
Amendment.
Councillor Maitland.
Amendment.
Councillor McCawtrey.
Amendment.
Councillor McComb.
Amendment.
Councillor McCutcheon.
Motion.
Councillor McKee.
Amendment.
Councillor Ogilvie.
Amendment.
Councillor Thompson.
Motion.
We have 7 votes to the motion and 7 to the amendment, so I would ask the Chair to make a casting vote.
Keep that the motion in.
Motion. Thank you. There will be no... The decision has been made that no objection to the application based on paragraphs 4.15 and 4.16 detailed in the report. Thank you.
Can we get Jim back in?
Thanks for that, Councillor Driver. Sorry, there's nothing written in them anyway. You want to swap? Have you got something written in yours? Thank you. Aye. Hey, thank you for that, folks. We now come to item 8, application to vary condition 1, condition requiring commencement of development within 5 years of planning permission 09P10002 for demolition of courtyard buildings, erection of chalet development comprising 54 log cabin lodges and existing golf driving range, alterations and extension to licensed hotel, relocation of grass cutting machine shed, construction of service roads, formation of LPG compound, drainage and landscape works at Lagganmore Golf Hotel, Portpatrick. Application type is full planning permission. Recommendation approved subject to conditions. The case officer, Robert Duncan, is taking us through this, so the papers say it's Peter Barker. But Robert, will you take us through your presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just appearing on behalf of Peter in the interest of efficiency. Looking at the first slide, this is the application site. To give you a sense of the kind of scale of this map, the site itself is about 2 kilometres to the east of Portpatrick and just to the south of the A77, the red line there above the site. So it sits at a distance probably about 700 to 800 metres. Looking at the actual proposed development site layout, it's obviously the same as that which was granted permission under the terms of 09P10002. There's a layout of 54 log cabins and what was an existing driving range, and we'll come on to that in the photographs. The building to the northwest in that kind of corner is the hotel. The grass cutting machine shed that's proposed is to the northeast. You'll see that as the darker rectangular building just within the site and the contours, and the smaller building on the right hand side of this picture, so to the northeast, is the Tide Manager's Dwelling House, and that was granted permission in 2005. It's referenced in the report. A slightly dark image, this one. This is looking south from the existing car park towards the area proposed for the chalets and lodges. You'll see the rising ground with the wind bushes in the background. The chalets would be in the middle ground, so in the area that intervenes between the place where the photo is taken and that rising kind of ridge. This is looking pretty much in the opposite direction. It's looking in to the north. You'll see the hotel just on the left-hand side, pretty much directly beneath the mast. You've got a range of buildings there proposed for demolition on the left-hand side. The golf driving range bays on the right-hand side as well. And in terms of the proposal, looking at the lodges, the log cabin lodges, they would occupy the field, if you like. So from the fence line, you can see in the foreground that area in the middle ground up to the buildings. This is a closer view. It's showing the range of buildings you have at the moment proposed to be demolished to make way for the redeveloped hotel and function complex, which is quite substantial. And I'm hoping that this photograph demonstrates there's nothing really of significance to be demolished here. Turning to the hotel, this is a view from the north, just really showing its existing appearance and character. And moving around to the side, this is the former fire damaged function suite, which is also earmarked for demolition. Looking at this case, it's a Section 42 planning application to vary the terms of Condition 1 of 09P10002, which allowed development to commence within 5 years of the date of permission. The legislation has changed since then, and we don't normally put time conditions on, but the Section 42 application, in essence, in this case, is tantamount to a renewal. So the key issues really are itemised at 4.4, 4.5 and 4.6 of the report. There's been no real change in circumstances, policy or other material considerations since the original application was granted, and on that basis it's recommended this be approved subject to the conditions listed in the report.
Thanks, Robert. Anybody, any questions for the planning officer while the slides are up, or in relation to the slides? Councillor Maitland?
Could we please go back to the layout? Would we agree that sort of layout, were we looking at this now? Would we consider, our policies would be considering possibly a sort of more organic looking layout? That's rather like an army camp.
Robert?
I would say there was landscape architect involvement with the original scheme, and that's referenced in the report. There is a requirement here for quite substantial landscaping to take place, and given the kind of open, fairly windswept nature of the landscape, that's taken to be an improvement. In terms of the question that you asked, would that be granted now? I mean, each application's got to be considered on its merits, but I don't automatically think a regimented layout like that would result in a refusal if it was in the right location and if it was accompanied by a decent landscaping scheme.
Never been at Butland your holidays?
Not for 45 years.
Councillor Dryborough. I was just going to say to you, if it was an army camp, there'd be a big block in the middle for the ablutions, and that's not going to happen there. Councillor McKee has just mentioned about car parking. I'm taking the little blocks at the side of each of the chalets as the car parking, 2 cars per sort of car parking area.
Robert?
That's correct, yes.
That's correct, Councillor Dryborough. We're still just looking at the images at the moment. Any other questions while the images are up? In that case, Amy, can you open the curtain again, please, or Tracy? And we've still got questions for officers. Councillor Dryborough, do you want to come back again? No? Okay, questions for officers? In that case, we're looking for green recommendation.
Agreed.
Okay, can you just confirm our decision, Gillian?
Thank you. The decision has been made to agree to the application as per the recommendations in the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Gillian. Come to item 9, erection of dwelling house, installation of septic tank and soakaway information of access at the Kilns, the park, Closeburn. The application type full planning permission, recommendation approved subject to conditions. Case Officer Patrick Hannah. Pat, will you take us through your presentation, please, and can we get the curtains again, Amy?
Thanks, Chair. The application was called in by Councillor Jill Dykes, as stated in the background to the papers, on the grounds that the nature and history of the application site and proposed construction warrants further discussion by the Planning Applications Committee, and that the proposal is of significant interest to the village and its inhabitants. Councillor Dykes has advised that she has other commitments, which is why she hasn't been able to attend the meeting today, but has asked that we read out a statement on her behalf, which states that I appreciate that the consideration of the whole area has now been undertaken by the planning officers, that the relatively new buildings have put a different perspective on this application, and that the orientation and location of this new application is such that it now warrants officer approval. I'm pleased to endorse this recommendation with the conditions outlined and hope that members support the officer recommendations. Just moving back to the application site here, the application site...
Did Councillor Dykes say then she's now agreeing with the report? Is that what you're saying there, Patrick?
That's correct. I think when she calls reports in, or calls an item in, she neither agrees nor disagrees with the report. It just seems there's a need or a presumption that members shouldn't engage in some debate about it, and that relates to the previous history. And I think the reason she's no here is that there was some confusion about notification of members, and by the time she received notification, she had taken another appointment. But maybe Gillian can deal with that, or David.
It was just if the planning officer was able to explain why she wasn't in attendance today.
Yep. So you carry on, Pat.
Okay.
Chair, could I ask a question? I mean, it was only, if it got called in, what's the point in us hearing it? If it's just going to be the same as the officer's recommendation originally, there's no objections or whatever else. So why don't we just approve it?
If that's a proposal, I'm happy to accept that.
I'm happy to second it.
Councillor Ogilvie, Councillor Maitland.
Chair, if Councillor Dyke hadn't called it in, it would have been dealt under delegated powers because there was no objections. Then it wouldn't have been in front of us. This is sort of wasting our time, really.
Well, I think that she does say that in her correspondence the previous history. Now it's been refused twice. I can only speculate she presumed it might come up for a refusal again, and she'd want members to debate the reasons behind that. However, there's no point in speculating what Councillor Dykes might or might not have done. It is here. It's legitimate to bring it here. You have a proposal from a member of the committee that we approve it, and you've got a seconder. I'm happy to have you support or otherwise, and then Councillor Maitland wants to speak as well. Gillian.
Chair, sorry to interrupt. I think although the application has been called in and brought here today, I think it is important, and I realise I've heard the views of some of the members today, that we do follow process still for this application, that we do follow the normal procedure for Planning Application Committee.
Councillor Maitland.
It's been covered, exactly the point.
Okay, in that case, Pat, can you just conclude your presentation, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. The application site is identified on the plan on the screen there, and you'll note that the main settlement of Park is to the east of the site, with 2 new dwellings to the immediate left, and to the immediate south are some Category B listed lime kilns. There were 2 previous refusals on the site on the basis that there was an objection from the conservation officer in that the house was sited directly in front of and intruded upon the setting and the principal elevation of the listed lime kilns as seen from the access point to the site. The current application site plan shows the house pushed to the extreme east of the site to open up the view to the lime kilns, and the conservation officer had no objections to this proposal. The proposed elevations, as we'll see in a moment, are in keeping with the character and scale of the existing houses to the immediate west of the site. These are the existing houses to the west of the site. Panning round, the lime kilns themselves, and the location of the house. And finally panning round to the final extent of the site. The application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions as set out in the report.
Can we have the curtains, Amy, please, or Tracy? Members, move the recommendation, Chairman. Okay. Councillor Hazlitt.
Chair, it's just a process issue that has been raised. When we, or a member calls something in, they don't have an idea what is actually within the report, and they usually bring it in because it was, the likes of this one was a historical reason. Now, is there no way that a member who, if there is a reason for the decision that has changed from a historical position, is there no chance that they can actually withdraw their request to actually bring it to committee?
It's a good suggestion. It's a process matter again. Maybe we should ask Gillian and David to discuss that matter and report back maybe next time the committee meet on how we can deal with such a situation where someone who calls in an item can then be comfortable with the proposal from officers. Can you answer it now, David? Okay, we've got an answer now.
It's never happened before, but it's perfectly at liberty for any member to call back a call-in, if you see what I mean, to withdraw their call-in, which would then revert it to delegated powers. So in that situation, the difficulty is by the time we've actually written the report and put it on the agenda, it's in the public domain, and therefore it's not at liberty for us as officers to then determine it. Probably, I suppose, the only thing in that situation would have been to, with the benefit of hindsight, maybe we could have phoned up Councillor Dykes and advised that we were minded to recommend approval and see if that changed her view. But as it stands, when somebody has called an application to committee, once it's on an agenda, it has to go before the committee.
I would worry that if we did such a thing, we might finish up in a roulette game where we call everything in and then hope that somehow it finds favour with us and then we withdraw it again. I don't know whether that's a good idea or a bad idea. I think maybe it'd be better just following the process when it's called and it actually comes here. Councillor Geddes?
Well, I would have to say, sir, on the back of Mr Sutty's suggestion, that is exactly what happened with myself a significant length of time ago in relation to an application in Wigtonshire. The case officer had sufficient nous, to quietly say, well, look, this has been recommended for approval anyway. Are you still minded, as it were, to be adhering to your position? And my response was, forget it, just let it go, deal with it.
Are members happy then that if a situation exists whereby any member calls an item in, case officer then phones up and says, this is what I propose to do with it, you can withdraw it? You happy with that? If that fits process and governance, then that's absolutely fine. It'll give members comfort as well, and it'll save them coming to a meeting maybe when it's no absolutely necessary for them to attend. Okay. Councillor Carruthers?
Sorry for coming in, Chairman, just on that, I mean, what is the process outlined? I mean, personally, I think we're with a point of predetermination now, whether it's for approval or whether it's for refusal. If we do go down the process, what you're outlining, just what process have we actually got in place and should do, what's the answer? Is it full council actually agreed that, or was it planning application committee? I thought this is a regulatory committee. I wouldn't have thought that we determine our own, maybe I'm wrong, determine our own processes that way, but it could be up for approval, up for refusal, it could be whatever it may be, it could be a consultation like the section 36 earlier. I think
the point's being made, and I think quite rightly, that at the time someone calls in, they don't know what the officer may be thinking in terms of that particular application. But if the officer phones the individual up and says, I know you've called this and this is what we propose to do you still insist that it goes to committee? If they say no, then officers can, that's what we're told by governance. So we're not changing council policy, we're just simply clarifying what circumstances might prevail.
To me it sounds like predetermination, Chairman.
It's being determined by officers. An officer simply telling a member, this is what I propose to do. Are you still happy to pursue your insistence to bring it to committee? And if the individual says no, then the officer simply deals with the case as he or she sees fit. Councillor McCaughey and Geddes.
I think this one's unusual because what the member has done has been smart enough to realise that, I've seen this one before, it's been refused, right, I want to call it in, have it discussed by committee. Ordinarily, members get tipped off by an objector. Most cases I've been involved in, it's somebody who's objecting, but there's no relevant number of objectors to bring it to committee, therefore it will be determined by officers. In this case, it's been eagle eyes of an elected member, rather than an elected member reacting to a member of the public, who's obviously worried that the officers will go a different, or will go in favour of the applicant. I see nothing wrong with what David's proposing. It makes a lot of sense, saves a lot of time for officers, saves a lot of bureaucracy.
And I think we've been told it's already happened, so it's not as if we're creating new precedents. Councillor Geddes?
With due deference and respect to Ian, Chair, I think that's an old chestnut that's already been answered a significant length of time ago. If a member of this Planning Applications Committee calls in, asks to call in, or seeks to call in an application, Chair, that's not predetermination in any way, shape or form. I mean, I've specifically taken governance advice on that in the past and been told, no, you're exercising a right that you have.
I'll give Ian the opportunity to reply, but we're not going into debate about this, because if there's an issue...
I'll stop at that, but I agree entirely with Councillor Geddes is saying. I just said you could be... The member may have it in mind, if it's in the interest of the community or the public in that area, it doesn't mean it's got to refuse or approve whatever it is. It's getting... They feel that actual decision should be determined by the members of the council, not the staff in below.
And that can still be brought to committee to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay, thanks for that. So we know where we are, or at least we know where we think we are. Pardon? Paul, Gillian's about to confirm our decision on item 9.
Thank you, Chair. Decision has been made to approve the application subject to the conditions recommended in the report.
Okay, come to item 10. Formation of synthetic football pitch, erection of 5 metre high perimeter fence and erection of 8 15 metre high floodlight columns and floodlights at former Lockerbie Primary School, King Edward Park, Lockerbie. The application type's full planning permission. The recommendation approved subject conditions, and the case officer Andrew Robinson. And before that, Stephen did speak to me, Stephen Thompson. He wants to make a short statement.
Thanks, Chair. And my apologies for not raising this earlier, but as a local member, obviously this is a project which in principle I've openly supported in my ward and for the wider benefit of the community. So obviously I'm not involved in the particulars of the planning process, but I feel I should declare an interest and leave the chamber for this item.
Thanks, Stephen. Councillor Ogilvie.
This has already been determined. I mean, Stephen, this has been determined. It was agreed at the Policy and Resources, where the money was allocated, that this would be targeted for this. This is just a procedural thing because it's the council's asking for its own permission. So, as a local member, I don't see why you would have to leave, but I'll take advice on that.
Well, Gillian will give advice, but first of all, it's not been determined. Policy and Resources may have made a decision on what to do with funds, but it's certainly not been determined. It's coming here for determination.
Yeah.
Gillian.
Can I just clarify, it's up to the elected member whether they wish to declare an interest or not?
Yeah. So, Andrew, can you take us through your presentation, please? And Peter?
On the basis of that, I'm a local member as well. I don't feel I need to leave the chamber.
That's absolutely fine. Amy, the curtains.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, this application for planning permission for the formation of a synthetic 3G football pitch, erection of fencing and floodlights at the former Lockerbie Primary School. This is the site shown in the centre of the slides, which actually shows the former layout of the school. This is the location plan, which shows the site's location in relation to surrounding features such as the West Coast railway line to the west, some playing fields to the south and some industrial units to the east. This site layout plan shows the layout of the football pitches as well as surrounding features and existing access to the site which would be utilised for the development. This is the proposed pitch layout, so it includes one large pitch and it can also accommodate 3 7-a-side football pitches as well. This is an elevational section through the pitch, so it shows the floodlights, pedestrian fencing which would be inside the site and some fencing around the site which would have a total height of 5 metres stretching to 7 metres on the western boundary. This is the proposed fencing surrounding the site, which is a green mesh fence. And there will be 8 floodlight columns surrounding the site, 4 on each side, and each floodlight column would have 2 floodlights. And this is the proposed light spillage of those floodlights. It's only the floodlights on the eastern side which would potentially face towards neighbouring residential properties. The remaining slides are just some photographs of the site and the surrounding locality. So this is looking into the site from the King Edward playing fields. This is looking north across the site, which you can see there's various materials left from the demolition of the previous school. This is looking east towards some industrial units bounding the site. This is looking west towards the nearest dwellings on Drive Vale. You cannot see the railway line on this photograph because it's actually located down an embankment between the site and the dwelling houses. These are the playing fields to the south of the site. This is the access road which used to serve the school, but it will be used for this development. The existing access into the site where a proposed car park would be formed as well. And finally, this is looking to the land towards the north, which is fairly open with just a neighbouring dwelling in the distance. So taking all the relevant considerations into account, officers are of the opinion that the development is acceptable, subject to conditions relating to exact car parking details to be submitted, control of floodlights and the proposed hours of operation. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Andrew. Before we open the curtains again, Ian.
Just one question, just to be clear. The 7 metre high fence, is that when you say it's to the west, is that along the railway?
That's correct. The extra 2 metres would actually be like a green net just to provide extra support or a barrier to the railway line.
So no other questions for Andrew with the slides. Can we open the curtains again, Amy, please? Questions for officers, Councillor Dryborough?
There's no questions here, just to agree the recommendations.
Okay, members happy to agree the recommendation. Gillian, can you confirm the committee's decision, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so the decision has been made to approve the application subject to the conditions detailed in the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Gillian. Item 11, appeal decision for information noting only. Members happy with that? Item 12, appeal decision for information noting only. Councillor Geddes.
Interesting points on both of them, though, sir. It proves the old adage that planning ultimately is a matter of opinion. You know, on both occasions, you know, we followed the officer's recommendations, the reporter found differently.
I think David has a slant on that, haven't you, David? Do you want to just rehearse it with members?
In other words, he's a bad loser.
Now. Normally I don't make any comment on these, I just give you the straight fact, but the one at Woodside Garage was quite unusual in as far as what you might recall was we felt it was, in theory, possible to add a suspensive condition to the Woodside Garage one, requiring the flood risk assessment to be done, but we felt it wasn't prudent to do so for the simple reason that the whole development was predicated on the outcome of the flood risk assessment. Interestingly, the reporter has looked at that. He's not disagreed with the need for a flood risk assessment, he's just approved it subject to a suspensive condition. So the applicant is still going to have to go through that whole exercise that we asked him to do anyway. So
there you go, Alistair.
Pyrrhic victory comes to mind.
That's exactly what David said. No further business, members. Thank you very much for your attendance today.